Chapter 1363. According to the knowledge of the night elf druids, the druid doctrine originated from the demigod Cenarius. The forest demigod Cenarius was the embodiment of the natural life essence of Azeroth. Very few people knew of the deep relationship between Cenarius and the Emerald Dream Dragon Queen Isra. In many people's impression, the two were lovers, but in reality, Isra was Cenarius' adoptive mother. Giving Fandral a little trouble was just that. Duque did not have the mood to deal with Fandral's Staghelm. After all, with Fandral's status, it was no longer worth Duque to deal with him personally. The dragon aspects were all very busy. It was already very rare for Duke to make use of the time difference to get them to help him out. Protecting planet Azeroth was a mission that was branded into their souls. Unless their entire dragon soul was corroded like Nesario, that sense of mission would naturally drive them to fulfill their duty of protection. Don't let me find out that you're abusing magic. Malygos still disliked Duque no matter what. Seeing as they had fought Thun to death together, Malygos was already giving him face by not flaring up on the spot. Alexstrasza was just about to say something, but Malygos had already waved his hand, opened a portal, and ran away. Sorry, he's just like that. The Red Dragon Queen was a little embarrassed. It's fine, I'm used to it. Duque looked in the direction where Malygos had disappeared and took a deep look. The second to run was the Bronze Dragon King. I'll look for you if there's anything. Yes, if you collect those bugs, remember to take care of them. If they run to the Tanaris Desert again, I'll hold you accountable. Nozdormu was very straightforward. He turned into a cloud of yellow sand and disappeared in the open space. This time, Duque touched his nose, a little embarrassed. Duque noticed that in the system notification, there was a message about the Karaji twin emperors looking for him. In the fierce battle with Thun just now, Duque naturally eliminated all factors that would interfere with his battle. The affairs of the magic net were all handed over to Karthika. Everything else was even more, don't look for me if there's anything, and don't look for me if there's nothing. Now that a bunch of deities were pulling him aside to talk, he had no time to care about them. The remaining two female dragon aspects were easy to talk to. Duque, I really have to thank you this time. Isra, with her eyes closed, gave Duque the impression that she was a gentle girl no matter when he looked at her. Of course, in reality, Isra wasn't that weak. Duque suddenly thought of something. It was a scene that should have happened in history, but did not happen in this world. That's right. What's up with the four guardians of the Emerald Dream, Laythorn, Amalise, Taylor, and Isidri recently? Duque seemed to mention something that made no sense. Isra tilted his head and showed a curious expression. That's strange. You have almost no contact with druids, and you don't know anything about the Emerald Dream. How did you know the name of my guardian? How did he know? Wasn't it because I had cleared them 10,000 times when I was playing the game? 10,000 times. Back then, I was shameless enough to have my members set their alarm clocks and open 4 Smuff accounts in Grey Valley, Twilight Forest, Feralas, and the Hinterlands, waiting for these 4 green dragon bosses to appear. Duque rubbed his eyebrows. As expected, there had been a large deviation in the history of this world. Normally, before Karaj opened the door, these 4 green dragons that were originally the guardians of the Emerald Dream should have been corrupted by the power of darkness and fallen into madness. But now, for some reason, there was no news of them at all. Although the shameless Duque had forgotten about these second-rate green dragons, he didn't mind spoiling it. Isra, actually, when I returned from the ancient war 10,000 years ago, I peeked into many scenes of the future. One of them was before Karaj opened the door. Your 4 guardians were corrupted by the power of the army and the King of Nightmares. Isra's face instantly became transparent. This wasn't an exaggeration. She had really moved her soul and body to another dimension. Alexstrasza panicked. Why didn't you say so earlier? Duque looked like he was in pain. Anyone who casually reveals the pulse of fate will suffer the backlash of fate. Many powers in the world were equivalent. Although the dragon aspects, which were created by the Titans, were very powerful, their power actually came from the planet of Azeroth itself. As a reward for protecting the planet and abiding by their oath, they had that basically unnatural ability and could replenish their energy from the planet. Duque's words really made Alexstrasza speechless. In a sense, Duque couldn't spoil it directly, but he could prepare in advance. This was already very good to everyone. The Emerald Dream was very huge. When not in battle, the dragons were more solitary in nature and had a habit of sleeping. This meant that Isra and the other green dragons were more like a queen and a vassal. They wouldn't interact unless there was something important. Not seeing each other for decades or even centuries was not a big deal. If Duque didn't mention it, Isra wouldn't even think of looking at her subordinates. After a few seconds, the human form of Isra became solid again. Thank you, Duque. Something really happened to those guys. Isra's expression was solemn. How is it? Is it serious? Alexstrasza was very nervous. It's quite serious. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to be beyond repair. Isra lightly bowed to Duque like a lady. I'm sorry. Although I wanted to talk more with you, it seems that I have to leave now. Go ahead. Duque nodded. Leave the void battlefield to us. Her big sister patted her chest. If I'm not here. Isra was a little hesitant. What? Don't we still have 4 guardian dragons? Alexstrasza directly grabbed Onyxia, who was trying to retreat, like an eagle grabbing a chick. Mistress, I've bled for you, I've blocked a knife for you, I've been your mount, you can't ignore me like this. Onyxia's plaintive voice was truly frightening and could make anyone who heard it cry. If one didn't know the reason, they would really think that Duque was some scumbag who played with a girl's body and mind and then heartlessly abandoned her. Damn it. I'm asking you to be a guardian dragon for a while, not to die. Duque flew up without hesitation and kicked Onyxia away. Yo, little female dragon, I think you still need to be taught a lesson. In the Penishade dragon tribe, no one dares to ignore me. That wasn't a request just now, it was an order, no. Chapter 1364. My dear Onyxia, although I would like to play dragon taming with you when I have time, I cannot disobey the king's orders. Have a safe journey, dear. Duque heartlessly waved goodbye, which made Onyxia break down. She asked directly through the soul connection. That tearful voice would break even the most cold-hearted person's heart. Master, my dear master. Are you really so heartless? After I became your mount, I have never rebelled. I have always done my best to complete the tasks you give me. For so long, even if I don't have any merits, I have worked hard. Are you really willing to let me go to that damned place with no gold, no treasure, and nothing but broken stones and endless demons? Am I just a thug and a plaything that you can throw away when you are tired of playing with me? As Onyxia struggled, she revealed the Dragon's Valley, intentionally or unintentionally. Duque swallowed his saliva and said slowly through the soul connection, when you come back, you will see a dragon bed made of pure gold and karazhan, specially made for you to sleep on. When Onyxia heard this, her eyes suddenly turned into 2 shiny gold coins. Really? You are not lying to me? I don't want a human-sized toy. I want one that I can sleep on in my dragon form. This is your master's promise, Duque said heroically. Onyxia bit her red lips. All right, if you really do it, after I come back, I am willing to add one more item to the dragon taming list. You can decide the specifics. It's a deal. Deal. Alexstrasza naturally had no way of knowing the soul communication between this master and servant, nor did she know what kind of dirty deal they had reached. She only knew that this evil little female dragon, who had no interest in guarding the dragon's sleep temple, suddenly glowed, gave up struggling, and was willing to work for her. Well, no matter what, this was a good thing. She glanced at Duque, and Duque gave her an okay gesture. Blinking, the Red Dragon Queen was still a little worried. You didn't pay a terrible price, did you? No. Onyxia is my most loyal mount. A little reward is only right. Besides, it won't hinder me in any way. That's good. Alexstrasza would never know how shameless a transmigrator could be. Golden dragon bed? Duque wouldn't go out of his way to do something so valiant and arrogant. But Duque was going to open a bank. That's right. After Duque had devoted himself to farming for 22 years, the resources of the alliance had reached an extremely abundant level. As a result, there were more and more economic problems, the biggest of which was currency transactions. In the past, even before the formation of the alliance, every country used the Arajuo gold coin as a unified currency. Gold characters were very expensive. Everyone agreed that they were very valuable. It seemed to be all right. In the past, buying a top-notch warhorse would only cost a few gold coins. Now that the alliance was playing with high technology, when large-scale military products like steam tanks came out, the cost could easily be thousands of gold coins, or even tens of thousands or millions of gold coins. With such a shocking cost, using gold coins to trade was simply asking for death. The alliance had already begun to use gold notes to replace gold coins, but the merchants didn't approve of it. Duque had already decided to issue paper money. To give paper money value, apart from the best security measures, there had to be enough collateral. As a transmigrator, the easiest thing to think of was a gold standard with gold as the core. In the early American economic system before transmigration, paper money could be issued with as much gold as there was gold. Therefore, the key to issuing paper money was that there had to be enough gold in the alliance. This gold couldn't be touched. Before Onyxia returned, Duque would specially send people to guard it. When she returned, so what if it became a bed for her to sleep on? He could even say that the alliance had specially found a demigod dragon to guard the gold. Duque wasn't worried at all that Onyxia would be corrupted. Giant dragons all had serious hoarding habits. They would hide all the valuable treasures in their lair and not give them to anyone. Otherwise, why would so many brave warriors slay dragons since ancient times? It was very simple. To get rich. The gold bars were all collateral anyway, and Duque wouldn't take them out for cash. It didn't matter at all. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Duque had never once said, "I will give you all the gold." As for the security and exchange of paper money, that was even simpler. As a demigod of the weave, Duque himself had the most profound magic in the world. He could design a barcode on the paper money. As long as a simple money detector was placed in a place where the weave could reach, it would immediately be able to identify the authenticity of any paper money. If anyone dared to counterfeit it, the weave would immediately send them back. Duque definitely wouldn't mind his elemental emissaries suddenly jumping out from the weave to teach those counterfeiters a lesson. In Duque's mind, as long as he had enough elemental emissaries, he would definitely be able to deal with these situations. Yes. His plan worked. After sending off the 4 dragon aspects, Tyrant walked over and whispered, "Goddess Alun asked me to tell you that when you're done, you can go to the moon goddess shrine as a guest. But this matter isn't urgent." Yes. The gods' business was with the gods, and the mortals' business was with the mortals. After sending off those high-ranking guys, Thrall could finally come over. He brought Wajin, Magni, and William over. "Are you satisfied with the loot this time?" Duque asked Thrall with a smile. Sar grinned, revealing his long fangs. Phew, I finally don't have to listen to those guys complaining about how the Alliance heroes have better equipment than the Horde heroes. A heaven-defying victory, coupled with the generous spoils of war, could resolve many conflicts without a trace. Even the Sun King and Astrian, who had lost the most manpower, now had the Dark Storm Gauntlets, the Cloak of Clarity, and the Ancient God's Embrace on his waist. These pieces of equipment produced by Thun that the powerhouses of the Alliance looked down upon were now nothing to him. The Sun King wouldn't show any dissatisfaction with Thrall at this time. Magni said, "When you were busy just now, Thrall and Wajin proposed to us that they hoped the Horde and the Alliance would sign a closer cooperation agreement. If possible, it would be better to sign it in the form of an alliance." After Magni finished speaking, Thrall and Wajin's uneasy expressions said everything. At this time, the strength of the Alliance and the Horde was not equal. To some extent, this was an alliance request that was not based on strength, but purely based on feelings. A majestic lion would never try to make an antelope its ally. No leader in their right mind would have agreed to it under such circumstances. Unexpectedly, Duke nodded. It's not a big problem. As for the specific details, let the people below discuss it. Chapter 1365. With regards to Duque's straightforward agreement, not only did the horde feel incredulous, but even William felt that it was a little too easy for the horde. William would never forget how his father had died. He hadn't died during the terrifying evacuation of Stormwind City, nor had he died in the cruel Second Battle of the Dark Portal. In fact, he had fought on the front lines time and time again without suffering any injuries. Yet, he had died in an assassination attempt by the orcs. As someone who had experienced the First and Second Battle of the Dark Portal, Duque should have hated the orcs the most. Why had Duque agreed? Was it too hasty? Or was it purely emotional? William didn't speak. He was a king and a strong man. However, when placed in the entire alliance, he was lacking in terms of strength, experience, knowledge, and judgment. Unlike the William in history who had to stand up and carry the flag, the current William still had Duque to protect him from the wind and rain. Perhaps his growth would be slower, but compared to the short-tempered and violent William who had been dominated by the ghost wolf for a long time, he would make fewer mistakes and grow more steadily. Suddenly, William remembered what Bolvar for Dragon had said. As the regent left behind by the previous king, William worshipped Anduin Lothar the most, and accepted all of Anduin's opinions unconditionally. After Anduin's death, Duque had disappeared time and time again. The first time, it had been 10 years, and the second time, it had been 4 years. During the period when William was growing up, Duque was basically a name that only existed in legends. Hence, the elder that William trusted the most was Bolvar. Bolvar's evaluation of Duque was as follows: apart from those who can't be shown in public, there are only 2 kinds of commanders in the world. One is the one who uses all the resources at hand to achieve victory, and the other is the one who obtains all the resources needed to achieve victory before the battle begins. The so-called battle is just a formality. Obviously, Duque is the latter. Bolvar's evaluation had always been deeply imprinted in William's mind. Listen more. Do more. He could ask, but he could not make things difficult for Duque. Because when Duque does things, there's always something that ordinary people like us can't understand. And every time, he'll prove that he's right. This was Bolvar's most important advice. Hence, William stood at the side and listened quietly like an obedient junior. Duque's promise made Sal and Wajin overjoyed. Thank you, Duke Marcus. Although I can't say that a human is the best friend of an orc, I have to say that you are the most trustworthy human in the tribe. Sal extended his hand and firmly shook Duque's. Duque sighed. This is all because of Azeroth. Moreover, no one in Azeroth knows what kind of enemy we are going to face next. I can only say that in the coming days, no one can relax their combat readiness. The Burning Legion still had the terrifying commander, Kill Jaden. Of the several evil ancient gods, only Si Thun came out. As a leader, I must prepare for the worst. Then your most pessimistic view is, Duque gritted his teeth. These guys mentioned above will all come out to cause trouble in the next 10 years. Sal and Wajin's expressions turned cold at the same time. If what Duque said was right, then the Alliance indeed had no reason to launch a war against the Horde. Fighting among themselves in front of a great enemy was really courting death. I understand. I will prepare the combat readiness plan and arrange it. On the other side, Kane also ran over, exchanged a few pleasantries, and took Sal away. As the victors, the Horde warriors were also eager to see their leader and hear his victory declaration. As for the spoils of war, there was not much trouble. Basically, it was settled after a few words of discussion. When all the tribes had left and only the Alliance was left, William finally asked the question in his heart, Uncle Duke, will those terrible things really happen? Phew. Duque exhaled, then handed a note to William. It's not a question of whether or not it will happen. It has already happened. After quickly reading the translated coded letter, William's eyes suddenly shrank. No wonder when you finished fighting Hacker and wanted to pull the troops over to Kalimdor, I stopped you in Stormwind City on the grounds of insufficient transport capacity. Duque smiled. In this Battle of Silithus, the soldiers sent by the Alliance were mainly dwarves and gnomes, and they forcefully bombarded the battlefield. There were not many infantry soldiers, and they were basically second-tier legions. None of the famous Scarlet Cross Legion or Griffin Legion came. Anyway, on the Alliance's side, there were orcs and taurens on foot, trolls and night elves on long range, and the forgotten mages on the mages' side. It was completely enough. In the face of a great enemy, no one played any tricks. The result was naturally a happy one. Who would have thought that Duque had already secretly detained the main force, ready to send them all to the dark portal at any time? Everything was based on one name, Draenor. It was also commonly known as the Outland. Now, the situation there had already undergone major changes. After Illidan's Stormrage was defeated by Arthas, who had yet to become a Lich King, he ran to the Outland to cause trouble, just like in history. However, in this life, he did not have Kale, that's as an accomplice. There was no Kai Zi, who was now officially appointed by the Alliance as the leader of the Outland Dispatch Army. As an upright High Elf prince, after washing away his shame in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, he was once again revered as a hero by the elves, and Queen Sylvanas did not stop her people from seeking refuge with Kale, that's. The biggest difference from the original history was that Kai Zi should have led the Blood Elves to beat the bitter Draenei like dogs, and even occupied their old nest in Draenor, the Storm. Now, history had changed drastically. Kai Zi seemed to be guided by fate, and ran to the Storm again. However, this time, the Draenei were almost wiped out by the Fel Orc army, and they had nowhere to go, so they sent a request for help. Kai Zi's sense of justice was overflowing, and he brought his elves to help. This made Duque, who was familiar with history, feel very amused. Are we going to war again? Magni asked calmly. No, not so fast. I plan to give some support, and then let Kale, that's hold on for a while longer. That's good. The Alliance's morale is still okay, but the soldiers' physical strength and the country's financial resources are at their limits. Magni sighed. Without Duque's economic development plan, the Alliance would probably be even more miserable. Chapter 1366. It was fine to fight the war to defend the country. That was a war where even if they lost their pants, they wouldn't even frown. But suddenly, in order to kill evil, they had to travel across the galaxy and send a larger army to another world. It was conceivable that this would cause widespread debate within the Alliance. Now that Duque said that they needed to slow down, it would undoubtedly make the people below heave a sigh of relief. Duque turned to William. You just wanted to ask me why I want to form an alliance with the Horde, right? Yes. That's right. May I ask, whose territory is Draenor? Everyone heard this and immediately understood. Even after the terrifying explosion, according to the intelligence, there were still many orcs living on the shattered Draenor planet. Duque continued, if the Horde is just this one in Azeroth, even if the orcs, taurens, trolls, goblins, and the Forsaken are united, how many people can they have? 200,000, at most. Not to mention 200,000, even if the Horde had a population of 1 million, I wouldn't care. But, it's different in Draenor. Queen Sylvie, who had just been playing with the spoils of war, strode over. How many Horde are there in Draenor? Adult warriors, no less than 3 million. Now the latest intelligence is that Illidan is acting as the Burning Legion's pawn, working with the Lord of the Abyss, Magtheridon, in an attempt to turn all orcs into Fel Orcs. This means that if Illidan succeeds, we will have to face 10 million strengthened orcs. After saying this, Duque added, at least. This time, the whole audience gasped. Duke continued to ask, are there people who are thinking, at least we still control the dark portal? Kalia shook her head. Just like how we chose to destroy on Karaj's worm nest to prevent it from giving birth to more worms to harm the world. This time, we will not let those who tried to destroy Azeroth go. Relying on defense alone would never be reliable. Passive defense was the choice of the weak. The real defense line was never those fortresses built on the pass, but a stronger army. Phew, Duque let out a long sigh of relief. It was great to have Tarina's out of the way. The entire alliance was under his control, and he didn't have to worry about anyone holding him back. At this time, he said slowly, that's why I agreed to form an alliance with the Horde. My biggest hope is to let Sar re-establish contact with the orcs of Draenor and let him organize the orcs to fight against Illidan's army. Could it be? Duque knew that Magni wanted to ask if he would release the tiger back into the mountains. Duque shook his head. According to history, Sar would have returned to Nagrand in the Outland and become a disciple of a master, stepping onto the path of nature and changing from a simple warrior to a true shaman. This Sal would be a more selfless and harmless leader. The beast men aren't the only powers in the Outer Realms. I have ordered Kael'thas to deal with the race that calls itself the Draenei. If possible, I hope to absorb the Draenei into the Alliance, because these Draenei believe in the path of the Holy Light, just like us. At this point, Duque lightly hammered Theon's breastplate with his fist. Among the many races in Azeroth, the dwarves, gnomes, and elves mostly formed an alliance with the humans because of benefits. The Draenei, on the other hand, joined the alliance because of their religion and ideals. In Duque's eyes, the Draenei joining the alliance was a matter of course. Moreover, the leader of the Draenei was Valen. The respectable Valen was also known as the Immortal. He had witnessed the destruction of countless worlds by the hands of the Burning Legion, and was one of the few people who could remember all of these worlds. Valen's origins were unknown, but in his hometown, Argus, he was once a respectable leader. 25,000 years ago, the Dark Titan, Sargeras, had promised the people of Velan infinite power, but he had wisely rejected it. He foresaw that accepting this power would bring endless disasters. However, the other two leaders of Eridar, Kil'jaeden and Archimonde, agreed to Sargeras' deal. Valen realized that he no longer had a place in Argus. He and his brave followers rebelled against the Dark Titan, and with the help of the mysterious holy light creature, Naru, escaped Argus. These brave exiles began to call themselves the Draenei, or the Exiles. Who knew that Kil'jaeden, who had surrendered to Sargeras, had been organizing a demon army in the past 25,000 years, not letting these Draenei go. Valen fought with the demon army for thousands of years, until he led his people to the world where the barbaric beast men lived. This became the refuge of this group of wanderers. They named this new world Draenor. By the way, the beast men didn't recognize the name Draenor. Basically, they would only call their homeland our world. Valen and his people lived a relatively peaceful and stable life in Draenor for hundreds of years. Although they knew that it was only a matter of time before the Burning Legion found them, they still worked very hard to coexist peacefully with the other races here. Unfortunately, because a troublesome shaman named Nazul discovered Kil'jaeden's will in the void, he was tricked, and so there were all kinds of conflicts between the beastmen and the Draenei. Under Nazul's tricking, the various beastmen clans gathered together, formed the old tribes, and directly broke through the largest settlement of the Draenei in Draenor, the holy city Shotrath. The miserable Draenei had no fixed residence for a time, and were forced to Zangarmarsh. Many Draenei even lost their minds, and became like wandering ghosts, wandering in the swamp. Now, Duque was very sure that Valen, the ancient prophet, was very clear that the Draenei would face a new threat. The Immortal had to protect his people, otherwise the entire Draenei race would be swallowed by darkness. And the appearance of the Alliance just happened to be the biggest opportunity for the Draenei to survive and multiply. Kael'thas sent a letter, saying that the leader of the Draenei, Valen, wishes to meet me, Duque said. Are you going? Jaina asked. Yes, of course I'm going, but not now. The Alliance needs rest and time. At this point, Duque patted William's shoulder. William, go on my behalf and reach a preliminary agreement with Valen, okay? I still have to busy myself with the magic net. Okay, Uncle Duque. A sharp light flashed in William's eyes. He knew that this was a rare opportunity to sharpen himself and prove himself. After a simple discussion, Duque first returned to Naxxramas, and then he summoned the twin emperors. With a smack, he threw Thun's tentacle on the ground. Okay, you two, is there anything else you're hesitating about? Chapter 1367. Thun's tentacle. This was an item that was deeply loved by gentlemen. If it was in the game, this accessory could summon a Thun's tentacle to whip the player's enemies. Just like Barev's butler bell, it could summon 3 thugs in an instant to obstruct traffic and affect the city's appearance. Ahem, wrong, it was to disturb the enemy. If Duque couldn't manipulate the elements and make them into whips or tentacles or something, he might use them to tame dragons someday. Of course, at this moment, this was just a proof. The twin emperors were very arrogant. In the past, their noses were almost pointing to the sky. However, when Duque showed this tentacle that had lost its owner but not its life, their dead-like faces changed several times. This was the end of an era. As servants, of course they could sense that Thun was done for. It was just that without seeing it with their own eyes, they still couldn't believe it. This was a fact. The era of the ancient gods is over. In the future, maybe Yogg-Saron will jump out, and so will Asha. Well, forget about that despicable villain and Zoth. But so what? If I can kill an ancient god, I can naturally kill the second, the third. Duque's words were like a hammer, hammering hard on the twin emperors' hearts, smashing their last reservations into powder. Simply forcing them to surrender was very simple. But kings and emperors were not the same thing. Since ancient times, there had been kings who occupied land, but there had never been emperors who occupied land. Simply forcing them to surrender, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't rebel in the future, or be a little lazy. That's right, Duque could indeed control whether their souls were annihilated or not, but he couldn't control their hearts, ambitions. Only the most thunderous suppression, even calculating the future, could subdue these 2 incomparably arrogant insect emperors. Moreover, in Duque's next plan, the twin emperors also played an extremely important role. As twin brothers, Emperor Vek-Lar and Emperor Vek-Lar were naturally connected. Yes. They were already dead. In their spiritual state, they could be said to have no desires. But they still had to find a way out for their own people. In this battle, the Karaji insect people could be said to have suffered heavy losses. The destruction of several large insect nests, as well as the fall of the Karaj Holy Temple, was almost a disaster for the Karaj insect people. If they wanted to struggle at death's door and for their race to continue, they had to find a way out. Otherwise, with the size of the insect race, it would not be a dream for them to be wiped out. Especially after Duque showed them the scene of him contacting the Azeroth Star Soul and destroying Thun's body and divine power organization with lava, they were even more clear that the insect race's greatest support was gone. In front of Duque, the twin emperors, who were once incomparably arrogant, heavily bent their knees in a uniform movement that was difficult for others to imitate, bending the spine that had only been bent in front of Thun. Veknalas, Vek-Lor, greets my lord. At this very moment, the twin emperors were broadcasting to the entire Karaj insect race through the insect race's unique mental network. With this kneel, the new master and servant names had been determined. From this moment on, there were no more Karaj insect people as Thun servants. There were only Karaj insect people as servants of Duke Marcus. In the eyes of humans and other races, becoming a servant was an absolutely unacceptable thing. In the eyes of the insect swarm, this was a kind of inevitability. Under the leadership of the strongest god in the realm of gods, even if they were servants, it was a kind of glory. For a moment, almost all the insect warriors who were still alive suddenly let out sharp cries. In every cave of Silithus, in the areas of Karaj that had not yet been cleared, the unique sharp cries of the insect swarm echoed everywhere. This scene frightened the Alliance and Horde warriors who had already entered a state of celebration. Many people almost wet their pants and threw down the large wine glasses in their hands, looking around for their weapons in a drunken state. The next moment, Duque's voice was broadcast in all places connected to the magic net. I am Duke Marcus, and the Kiraj insect people are now swearing allegiance to me. This is not an enemy attack. I repeat. This is not an enemy attack. This message was quickly translated into various language versions: Darnassus, Dwarven, Gnome, Orc. The air was suddenly silent, and immediately, in every corner of Silithus, there was an even louder cheer. Ha ha ha. I knew it. Bullshit. You were the first one to wet your pants. Did you see that your pants are wet? Don't talk nonsense. That's the wine I spilled. Don't talk nonsense. Let's drink to our invincible commander, Sir Duke Marcus. Cheers. The group of heartless guys once again drank to their heart's content. Only the higher-ups of the horde looked very interesting. Sal and Wajin looked at each other and saw each other's bitterness. The gap between the alliance and the horde had widened again. This time, it could be said that both continents were suffering at the same time. The alliance first had Ragnaros the Balrog and Nefarian the demigod dragon causing chaos, then Naxxramas spreading natural disasters back and forth, and finally, the two troll clans, kingdoms, of Zwaman and Zul-Gurub. The horde was only attacked by the swarm. The successive disasters of the Eastern Kingdom continent were all extinguished without mishap. Although the losses on the battlefield were not small, and many villages and towns were destroyed, it was far from the point of serious damage. The development of the horde, on the other hand, had suffered a devastating blow. All the new colonies were destroyed, and the major cities were hit hard and almost fell. After fighting a battle, it was still a victory. In terms of economy and population, the horde was suffering a huge loss. Even if it wasn't a huge gain, they would at least be able to fight to a draw with the floating fortress and the entire insectoid alliance. In addition, the horde now had Duque, a living, unremarkable demigod, as the boss. This gap was so desperate that they could only look up to him. At this time, Grom stood up. Great Chief, I have an idea, At the same time, in Naxxramas, Duque gently lifted the twin emperors with the hand of magic. Since you have chosen to be loyal to me, I am not an ungrateful guy. These two things can be considered a greeting gift to you. First, Duque gently put on the newly received ring on Vecnilus the Great's hand. Originally, this ring should have been called Ring of the Ancient Gods, symbolizing the power and glory of Thun. Now, the name on that ring was forcibly crossed out by Duque with high-intensity divine power, and a new name was written next to it in the common language, Ring of the Godslayer. Then, what was given to Vecnilus the Great was, Argus Apostle. As the saying goes, the Emperor's mind. The twin emperors were such smart guys, how could they not think that Duque was warning them not to have any unnecessary thoughts? Chapter 1368. Your boss, Thun, was pretty awesome, wasn't he? Sorry. He was killed with one slap. It didn't matter who did it, he was now a dregs. The Burning Legion seemed to have destroyed countless stars. They were invincible in the universe, right? Hee hee. His boss was stabbed to death by me, and his subordinate, Archimond, was also stabbed to death by me. With these two things, at least there was no need to worry about them daring to jump ship to the Burning Legion or other ancient gods. Thank you, my lord. Although they understood, the twin emperors accepted it. For a defeated person, this was already the best outcome. Didn't you know that during the Dark Empire, the defeated people were all eaten? There were other reasons for Duque's benevolence towards the twin emperors. He had single-handedly promoted 6 elemental emissaries, and the performance of the 6 of them was as Duque had expected, completing the duty of extracting magic from the elemental realm to fill the magic net for Duque. From a pharaoh's point of view, they were absolutely competent and qualified. However, after the magic net was established, Duque inevitably had greater ambitions. Ordinary swords were meaningless to demons that were easily over 5 meters tall. The only 2 paths that could improve the combat power of mortals were magic and technology. In terms of technology, Duque had already continuously stuffed all kinds of things that could be called black technology into the alliance. The speed of advancement seemed to be the limit at the moment. 2 legs were better than 1. If the magic net could be upgraded and strengthened, the Alliance could have the maximum number of mages when the Burning Legion officially broke into Azeroth in the future. From the establishment of the magic net to the trial run, Duque immediately discovered a tragic problem: he was too busy. Mechanical replies could not actually meet the needs of the customers, or the needs of these little mages who would become Duque's dedicated thugs in the future. Pharaoh was a guy with a particularly big brain, no matter where he was in the world. If he did not want to be tested for countless loopholes and abuse of the magic net, he had to invest enough intelligent managers. Otherwise, it was very likely that the tragedy of artificial intelligence being played as a human worker before Duque's transmigration would occur. As elemental emissaries, Sapphiron and Thaddeus were undoubtedly qualified. However, these 2 guys were more brawn than brains when they were alive. It would be too difficult for them to be managers. Alonso's was also a person who was good at preaching, but not very good at managing. In reality, it was basically Khadgar who was struggling, while Majordomo and Black Witch Farina helped out. One of the 2 guys behind her was a fire demon, and his way of doing things was rough. The other one was never at ease with her. If Karthika wasn't a spiritual body, he might have died from overwork. Now, Duque could finally add a powerful ally to his weave, the Demon Emperor Vec Lore. As a mage emperor, he was one of the few demigods who was proficient in multiple types of magic. In addition, he had been a Queen Zerg for the past few thousand years. The Bug Swarm's thought network had always been one of the multi-threaded manipulation abilities that human mages dreamed of. In fact, on Earth in another world, before the development of electronic computers, no one had been able to control hundreds of different objects to do different things at the same time. Being able to do 2 things at once was already considered a genius, but being able to do 100 things at once, he. However, Vec Lore could do things that were unimaginable in the eyes of humans, but to him, it was as common as eating and drinking. What truly limited his strength was the amount of elemental energy he could extract in a unit of time, as well as the problem of elemental conflict, and not the ability to cast multiple spells. After Duque connected Vec Lore's soul to the weave and gave him authority that was second only to Khadgar, who had been so busy that he almost went crazy, was scared out of his wits. Casually connecting to a mental connection and listening to the conversation between Vec Lore and the mage connected to the weave, Khadgar realized that he still had a lot to learn. "I am the new weave administrator, Vec Lore. Please speak. I am Peter Johnson. I would like to ask if there is a powerful fire spell that can blow up a mountain in one move?" "There is, but you can't use it. If you bring up such unrealistic topics again, I will ban you from connecting." "Then when can I have all the metamagic abilities?" Vec Lore's divine will reached out of the weave and scanned the fellow. "Not in this lifetime. What kind of attitude is this? Don't you know that I am a famous archmage?" This self-proclaimed noble fellow was furious. Scram! He immediately cut off the connection to the weave and even used his administrator authority to block that fellow's access. Not only that, he had also secretly added him to the blacklist. If that fellow joined the Calamity Army or something like that, he would directly use magic from the weave to destroy him. Vec Lore also had a bad temper. Although he was used to commanding the entire swarm with his mind, that did not mean that he had to be as polite as the customer service staff that a certain transmigrator had met in the past. Even if he met an idiot, he would still have to coax them. In Khadgar's eyes, this was definitely going overboard. He wanted to say something, but Duque had already shouted from the side, "Well done." What else could he say when his boss was like this? Previously, when the weave had just been established, Khadgar had still patiently dealt with these people who were too weak and had a bad temper. Now that Duque had the time to set the rules, he could finally relax. The weave seems to be neutral, but it is actually a magic system used by the Alliance's military. There is no need to take advantage of those people who have too much self-awareness. Later on, set a stricter rule. "I understand." Khadgar nodded and bowed. With Vec Lore, Khadgar could become a higher-level prosecutor and supervise Vec Lore. Duke had already made plans to defeat even more magic users in the future and capture their souls to fill up the weave, working for him. After Duke had beaten the twin emperors with a stick, he should have given them a carrot. Unfortunately, the twin emperors were not ordinary people. Ordinary small favors were meaningless to them. The only thing that could increase their sense of identity was the reproduction and elevation of the entire Kiraj insect race. This was not something that could be achieved overnight. Fortunately, there was such an opportunity at this moment. William had also returned to Naxxramas. In the command center, he returned to the command room almost immediately after attending the victory banquet as though he was just going through the motions. He was looking at the intelligence on the outland. Valilla walked over. "You just won a big victory. Don't you want to take a rest first?" William rubbed his eyebrows. "The gods should be the gods, the mortals should be the mortals." I didn't understand this sentence before, but now I have a deeper understanding of it. Uncle Duque needs to focus his energy on more important things. He needs to focus on dealing with stronger enemies. As a junior, and also as a king, I should do my best to help. Brawl Bearskin, who was at the side, was about to say something, but saw Valilla shake her head. Chapter 1369. Varian had a good father, he was born noble, and there were so many legendary figures around him to take care of him. This was both a blessing and a curse. That was because, under the halo of those legendary figures, everything he did seemed to pale in comparison. Killing the evil god Hacker, even if Hacker was the weakest existence in the divine realm, Hacker was still a god. If this was the previous 2,800 years of peace, this feat could be boasted for dozens of lifetimes, and it would be sung by countless bards for thousands of generations. Unfortunately, Varian's achievements were completely overshadowed by Duque. That was because Ragnaros's clone, the demigod dragon Nefarian, the demigod Lich Kel, Thuzad, and the real ancient evil god Si Thun were also killed at the same time. This was a shared glory, but it was also the sorrow of being in the same era as other great people. Because, in the history books, only the strongest person in the alliance, Duke Marcus, would be recorded as leading a group of strong people to complete this great kill. Perhaps historians and the upper nobles would remember the names of every participant, but it was a pity that ordinary people would only remember the first few names, Duque, Thrall, Magni. If he was a mediocre person, he might be depressed under such a blow and be mediocre for the rest of his life. Varian wasn't. He was eager to prove himself. He was eager, but not extreme. Fortunately, in terms of seniority, Duque was a generation older than him. Duque didn't directly set any rules and regulations for him, and didn't force him to do any work or training that he was unwilling to do. Otherwise, in his youth, it was very likely that he would become distorted and degenerate like Arthas. At this moment, Varian's eyes were filled with enthusiasm for work. "Brawl, I need the known maps of the Outland, as well as the reports of all the general levels that were sent to the Outland." Varian thought that he would get a colored map, but he didn't expect Brawl to bring the great astrologer Solarian. Solarian came over and opened her hands. Suddenly, a three-dimensional map appeared in midair. Her slender fingers, which were unique to elves, flew nimbly, marking the three-dimensional map with different colors. Solarian's clear voice spoke. "The Outland used to be the planet Draenor. 17 years ago, Master Marcus threw the third-generation great chieftain, Azul, out of Karazhan in a state of self-destruction. At the same time, it caused a big explosion because the core of the explosion was located in Draenor. The result is that Draenor is in tatters. Right now, the Outland is divided into 7 regions: Hellfire Peninsula, in the east, Netherstorm, in the northeast, Blade Peak, in the northwest, Zangarmarsh, in the west, Nagrand, in the southwest, Taroka Forest, in the south, and Moon Shadow Valley, in the southeast where Illidan's main force is located. The Door of Darkness is currently in a very stable state. The door in the direction of Draenor is located at the easternmost side of the Hellfire Peninsula. The first group of expeditionary forces that were sent out back then had established a sturdy outpost on the eastern side of the Hellfire Peninsula. Recently, Master Marcus upgraded it to a firmer level, 1 castle, Glory Castle, with Sir Danath Trollbane as the supreme commander. Here. Solarian pointed, and the three-dimensional image of the nether storm in the northeast suddenly protruded. Prince Kale, that's is leading the Blood Elves to support the Draenei in defending the storm fortress. According to the intelligence, because they activated a huge robot guard, ethereal mech, that is more than 10 stories tall, they were able to withstand the siege of tens of thousands of fell orcs with a small number of troops. At this point, Solarian stopped. Is there anything you want to ask? William frowned. In 7 years, the Alliance has only expanded their control area in the Outland? Supplies are very difficult. On the Hellfire Peninsula, almost no grass grows. On the vast reddish-brown plains, there are mutated creatures everywhere. In areas without the protection of the Holy Light Magic Circle, the advanced troops don't even dare to casually drink unfiltered water. Fortunately, when we went there, we brought enough supplies for 30,000 people to use for 2 years. Relying on measures such as limiting supplies, we managed to survive the period when we lost contact. Solarian then pointed to the middle of the Hellfire Peninsula. There is the Fell Orc Fortress, Hellfire Fortress, here, which has lost its mind after being contaminated by evil energy. According to incomplete statistics, there are more than 200,000 Fell Orcs gathered here, and their real leader is the Burning Legion's Abyssal Lord Magtheridon. Not only him, there is also a humanoid giant mechanical creation, Fell Mech, on the plains that is difficult for our current civilization to understand. According to calculations, it is nearly 20 stories tall. Looking at the appearance and data of the Fell Mech projected by Solarian, William's brows furrowed even tighter, forming a narrow, Chuan character. Brawl couldn't help but sigh. Other than the dwarves' cannons, I reckon there is nothing that can kill this thing. William asked, won't this thing attack Glory Castle? It will wander in a fixed area and attack all creatures in its line of sight. This area happens to be between the Dark Portal and Glory Castle, and it brings a lot of trouble to our supplies. Every time we resupply, we will lose at least 60% of our horses. Horses? Solarian emphasized, because there is a lack of water in this place, coupled with the fact that it has been ravaged by the Fell Mech for a long time. The quality of the soil is very bad. The dwarves' steam tanks often get stuck and are unable to move. So we use the most primitive horses for transportation, and because of the lack of necessary water and fodder, the losses to the horses are also huge. William wasn't a king who had never fought a war and could only command blindly. He had been trained in the most orthodox military academy in Stormwind, worked as a slave gladiator, and personally commanded the war against the Troll Empire in Zul'Gurub. William was much stronger than he was at the same time in history. He understood why they couldn't advance after hearing that. In order to defeat a strong enemy, they had to have a strong military force or extraordinary individual combat power. If the Alliance's powerhouses couldn't leave, they could only accumulate military power. Unfortunately, the supplies were terrible, and the distance between the Dark Portal and Glory Castle was more than 200 kilometers. William didn't think that the starving soldiers would be able to defeat the ferocious Fell Orc army. Phew. I understand the general situation now. William let out a long breath. When the other kings arrive, I will discuss this matter with them. At this moment, the door suddenly opened, and Duque came in with an existence that surprised William. Looking at the other party's pair of cicada wings and 4 sharp claws, William was a little dumbfounded. Uncle Duque, is she Sartura? This female insect person, who exuded the aura of a powerhouse and was wearing a purple long-sleeved shirt, spoke awkwardly in the common language. I am Sartura. Chapter 1370. Duque waved his hand. William, she's Sartura's sister. Although she's slightly weaker, I can't find a better helper for you. William understood immediately. You're planning to send the Zergs to the Outland? Of course, there were humans and Protoss. How could there not be Zergs? Duque almost blurted out this sentence. Sigh. Long before World of Warcraft, there was StarCraft first. Cough cough. Speaking of which, when the Draenei wore full body armor, they definitely looked like the Protoss in StarCraft. Not to mention the humans now. Duque had been feeding them advanced technology for more than 20 years. How could the Alliance fight a war now? The infantry flanked, the tanks opened the way, and the self-propelled cannons followed and set them on the ground. Fire the cannons and bombard them. It would be perfect if they could really destroy the Burning Legion's interstellar battleship. Although the Alliance also had flying battleships like the Heaven Breaker, the Willow Nail, which was bigger than a human's fist, looked low-class no matter how one looked at it. As for the race, it wasn't so particular. Now, there were only 3 Queen Zergs left among the Kiraj insect people. They were all under on Kiraj and had become Duque's servants. As long as there was enough meat, he could continuously create a terrifying Zerg army. In the harsh environment of the Outland, delicate things like warhorses couldn't be used. Zergs were just right, and he wouldn't feel any heartache if they died. William was happier to see Sartura than his own queen. He was smart enough to completely understand Duque's intentions. William excitedly gave an Alliance military salute to Duque. "Your Excellency, please give me your instructions." Since William wanted to do business, Duque let him be. "I have more important things to do in Azeroth. It's about a big conspiracy of the Burning Legion. It's not convenient for me to reveal too much now." Smart people were easy to talk to. William understood with just one look from Duque. The only Burning Legion big boss that could make Duque worry so much was kill Jaden. Yes. Kill Jaden the trickster. If it was this guy, then it was only natural that Duque would be in charge. Varian nodded to show that he understood. Duque continued, "The all-out war in the Outer Realms won't start so soon. The Alliance had just gone through a series of battles. Be it manpower or resources, they were unable to support an all-out war in a short period of time. Illidan is not our only enemy. Therefore, I hope that your first step will be to connect with the tribe and open up the road from the Dark Portal to the Glory Fortress. Build 2 railways and build a fortress with 500 people at each end of sight to ensure our supplies. The final goal is to flatten the entire Hellfire Peninsula." William's pupils constricted slightly. Duque's intention was to wipe out the hundreds of thousands of evil beast men and the Hellfire Fortress, as well as the Abyssal Lord Magtheridon and the Fell Reavers. "How many troops can I have?" How many troops to commit in the early stage depends on the supplies. Before the expansion of the Dark Portal, including the advance guard of Glory Castle, there were less than 50,000 Alliance members and 3,000 mechanized vehicles. And then? If I settle the Hellfire Peninsula, and the Alliance hasn't mobilized yet, what am I going to do? Varian asked. Duque stared into Varian's eyes and saw only determination and confidence. Duque sighed and pointed to the southwest of the Hellfire Peninsula. "If you complete your mission perfectly, then on one hand, you can consolidate the position. On the other hand, you can pass through here. If my information is correct, there is a road called the Thorn Path that leads straight to the Taroka Forest. If you go west from here, you can reach Shotrath City." Shotrath City? The main city of the Drenii? Varian frowned. Didn't the information say that it was besieged by the beast men more than 20 years ago and turned into ruins? It used to be, until a group of Shatrars came. Shatrars meant born in the Holy Light. They were a group of Naru people who came to the Outer Realms to intercept and kill the Burning Legion. The Naru people lived in the ruins of Shotrath City. There was also a small group of surviving Drenii priests who insisted on performing the holy rite in the ruins of the temple in the city. As the news of the arrival of the Shatrars gradually spread, these priests called Aldo quickly regained their lives. The reconstruction of Shotrath City quickly began. If it wasn't for the arrival of another group of invaders, the reconstruction would have been completed very quickly. Here, the original history took a beautiful turn. The attack this time was indeed from Illidan Stormridge's troops. However, in history, it was an egg-seeking fool who sent a large group of blood elves to destroy this city. Now, it was Gagoma, the inspector from Hell Fortress, who led 10,000 Fell Orcs to surround and annihilate the remnants of Shotrath City. When the Fell Orc army crossed the bridge at the edge of Shotrath City, the Aldo bishops and believers also lined up and swore to defend the Dome of Holy Light. But then, less than a quarter of an hour after the fierce battle began, the Dreenii who were in the midst of a fierce battle suddenly welcomed a reinforcement army. When Prince Kale, that's heard that the Dreenii were going to kneel, he responded to Willen's request and sent his troops from Glory Keep. As a result, when the fell orcs were entangled, this blood elf army directly shot from behind and used a large number of magic to set off a grand fireworks, turning the fell orcs into ashes. Just as the Dreenii were joyfully welcoming these reinforcements, something unexpected happened. The blood elves knelt on the ground in front of the Dreenii. The leader of the army, a blood elf elder named Vorithal, rushed into the dome of holy light and asked the leader of the Naru, Dao, to meet him. When he saw the Naru, Vorithal knelt down and said, I have seen your illusion, Naru. Only you can save my people. My followers and I are willing to serve you. Well, someone under Kaizi had jumped ship. Kale, that's in this life, was not the blood elf prince in history who was possessed by the devil. Although Duque had given him full authority to handle the alliance's diplomacy in the Outland, and even had the right to declare war on the Dreenii, or to take back these traitors, Kaizi said, if believing in the holy light can reduce their demon addiction, then I will respect their choice. That's right. The vanguard army came to the Outland and did not receive the nourishment of the Sunwell for many years. The demon addiction once again broke out among Kale, that's subordinates. Although it was not fatal, it seriously affected the combat power of this blood elf army. In the end, this line of blood elves joined the forces of Shotrath City and called themselves astrologers. William rubbed his eyebrows. The forces of the Outland are really complicated. Are you afraid? Duque smiled. A little. William said honestly. Very good. Only by facing the fear in your heart will you truly grow. Go ahead and do it. Even if you blow up the Outland again, I have a way to help you make up for it. William smiled. Chapter 1371. Hey! I wasn't the one who blew up Draenor for the first time. William laughed like a child. The smile on Duque's face was equally amusing. It was Kill, Jaden who threw Na Zol into my mage tower like a bomb. I merely threw Na Zol back. How can you blame me for blowing up Draenor? Yes. It's Kill, Jaden's fault. William smiled faintly, and came over to give Duque a bear hug. Duke's body wasn't considered thin and weak, but it was a pity that William had inherited his father's genes and had grown tall and strong. Wearing thick plate armor and a large pauldron, he looked almost twice the size of Duque. When they hugged each other, their seniority seemed to be reversed. That was not important. For the first time, William felt the warmth of a family member. Growing up, he was not unfamiliar with Duque, but he was not familiar with him either. During his growth, Duque spent too little time with him. Moreover, the direction of development was not right. He was closer to Duque, who was a warrior, than to Duque, who was a mage. For the past 20 years, he had never felt like a family member to Duque. Their ages were almost 10 years apart. In theory, they were half a generation apart, but in reality, they were one generation lower. After all, Duque was a fierce person who played along with Lang's father and Lothar. It was a strange feeling. The human heart was the most complicated thing in the world. Once upon a time, William was like a king. He was distressed about how to deal with the huge Marcus family. For a kingdom, it was a typical case of too big to handle. A king was not a king, and a subject was not a subject. However, when Duque flirted with all the queens and female leaders in the alliance, and did not proclaim himself as an emperor, William began to understand that Duque's pursuit would not intersect with his own. They were like two parallel lines that would never intersect, but were moving in the same direction. After knowing that Duque had become a demigod, this feeling became even clearer. Now, if he had to describe his relationship with Duque, it was more like an extremely close and reliable ally, not the so-called king and duke. William smiled as he patted Duque's back. For Azeroth. Duque was a little dazed, but he still smiled. Yes, for Azeroth. That's right, what if I fight against Illidan? Duque whispered, "Don't let him kill you, and don't kill him." Infernal affairs, Duque said in a voice that only William could hear. Varian shuddered. When Duque returned to the War of the Ancients, he had no intention of hiding it from the higher-ups of the Alliance. Other than the part where he accidentally slept with Tyrant, everyone knew that Duque had gone to the Burning Legion under the alias of Infernal Affairs. If Duque mentioned this name, wouldn't that mean that Illidan was? No wonder Varian had such a big reaction. In fact, would the Eggs generation be like history? Would they be in Chao camp, but their hearts were in Chao camp? Duque was a little uncertain. Because of Duque's activity in the War of the Ancients, Illidan couldn't even show his face to him. The attention of all the big shots of the Burning Legion, including Kill, Jaden, was attracted by Infernal Affairs. Moreover, after being blown up by the twisting nether, would it cause an egg to make a wrong judgment? After being imprisoned for 10,000 years, would he develop other truly evil thoughts and fall into the path of demons? This was the real Azeroth. Each and every one of them was a living hero, an ambitious and ruthless villain. The human heart was the most difficult to guess. Even Varian had a grudge against Duque for so long, so it was hard for Duque to say what would happen to Illidan. So, Duque added to Varian, but the human heart is the most difficult to guess. I can't guarantee that his mind has not fallen because of the long-term use of evil, so you have to judge for yourself. Yes. Varian nodded his head heavily. He couldn't be sure, so he could only classify Illidan as an evil first. After explaining everything that needed to be said, Duque left the command room after leaving the Zergs to Varian. As soon as he walked out and turned a corner, Duque suddenly found Magni in the corner with 2 secret room guards guarding him. Magni was in the corner, sitting on the floor and drinking from a flat metal bottle. Duque was stunned, and then smiled. "Are you worried about Varian? I'm good brothers with Anduin and Lang. I watched them grow old, and I watched Varian grow up." Magni's words were a little out of the blue. It was exactly because he saw Varian as a symbol of his son. Duque sighed slightly. In the corridor, a breeze blew past, causing Duque's mage cloak to flutter. "It's a pity that I missed out on a lot. I couldn't understand you in the past. Because in your dictionary, the word loyalty doesn't exist. I'm very curious. Why would a person with no loyalty have such unparalleled courage and a sense of justice?" "Because I'm a transmigrator." Duque couldn't say this out loud. He could only say, "I grew up in a place that didn't belong to the 7 kingdoms. I just happened to be part of Stormwind. There was no such thing as loyalty if one didn't receive any favors." "Oh, is that so? If I have to differentiate, I'm only loyal to my own ideals. Azeroth must not perish." Magni suddenly laughed. He handed the metal bottle in his hand to Duque. "On this point, you're better than the traditional Dalajan priests. Those guys would only come out of their damned laboratories when their toilets were blown up." The Dwarf King's bottle was dirty. It had been used for a long time, but Duque didn't mind it at all. He took a big gulp of it. F***CK. Is this pure alcohol? Or did some bastard give 100% medical alcohol mixed with water to this bastard Magni? With this purity, it could definitely light a fire. What was the concept of alcohol with more than 80% alcohol? Drinking it would make one's whole body feel like it was on fire. Even though Duque had the body of a demigod now, he couldn't withstand it with just his physique alone. In a fit of anger, Duque secretly passed that portion of the alcohol to the flame magic circuit. "Damn it, burn it however you like." Even though it was the aftermath of the strong alcohol, Duque still choked to death. Cough, cough. Seeing Duque coughing, Magni and the 2 guards in the secret chamber couldn't stop laughing. Ha 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 ha. It was rare to see the commander-in-chief of the Alliance and a demigod of the Weave make a fool of himself. Duke plopped down on the floor and leaned over to Magni. This time, he took a small sip of the drink. With the first sip and the mental preparation, he felt much better. "Don't worry, old friend. Although I've never treated William as a real relative, he's an important part of Azeroth. Be it because of Andoin or Lang, I'll nurture him well. Yes. Unknowingly, a human and a dwarf drank too much. Chapter 1372. So dizzy. I want to vomit. I'll vomit if I want to. It's been a long time since I've had this feeling. In a daze, Duque returned to the days when he was still studying. His roommates would drink beer that cost a few yuan a bottle at a barbecue stall, boasting, and if they really couldn't take it anymore, they would go to the internet cafe and sleep on the chairs for the night. In a daze, Duque seemed to hear angry voices, and then he felt as if someone was touching his body. After an unknown amount of time, a gentle light shone into his eyes. Duque woke up. He felt something soft and bouncy on his neck. His face seemed to be pressed by something soft. Duque knew that it was definitely not a pillow. When he opened his eyes, the first thing Duque saw was the beautiful, silver-haired Sasha. The female elf keenly sensed that he had woken up and woke up first. She raised her long eyebrows and blinked her bright eyes. Seeing Duque's slightly stunned expression, Sasha smiled. She stretched out her long, white finger and hooked Duque's nose. I'm sleeping now. There was nothing like the treatment of an emperor. Although his back was pressed against the bed, Duque discovered that his head was actually resting on a pair of fair and supple thighs. There was even a giant cat massaging his face. In Duque's harem, there was no one else but Aurelia who could have such a violent aesthetic of both mass and volume. Duque gently pried open the pair of indescribable things that were blocking his vision, and then he saw Aurelia's perfect and flawless face. I'm really sorry for blocking your vision. The Windrunner's elder sister had a very interesting expression on her face. It was hard to tell whether she was happy or angry. Although she said that, Aurelia just sat there and let him enjoy the treatment of her lap pillow. He turned his head and pressed his ear against Aurelia's smooth and flat waist. Don't say that. This is also my exclusive benefit. As for the shameless Duque, Aurelia no longer had any temper. Do you know what you did last night? In any case, we slayed a god. It's something that only happens once in 10,000 years. What's wrong with celebrating a little crazily? Duque rubbed his face against Aurelia like a child. Aurelia was about to say something when she suddenly remembered her first meeting with Duque. At that time, Duque was just a kid. Although age had lost its meaning after immortality, Aurelia's jade face was still as red as fire. Bastard, you vomited all over us after you came back, all right? Sasha complained into Duque's ear. So I can still roll back. Not bad, not bad. Duque replied shamelessly. Humph. Be careful, don't move too much. It'll be bad if you hurt the baby. Bullshit. That thing didn't even have fingernails. It's my seed. Can't I sense it? Let me tell you, absorbing mana is a very slow process. Don't expect your tummies to swell without a year or two. Duque's demigod descendants were extremely special. They had nothing to say when he used the principle of demigods to suppress them. Then why did you still forbid us from participating in the Battle of Cyclone? Aurelia was unhappy. Before Duque could speak, Sasha pulled her sister. But it's also a fact that we're carrying Duque's child. Boo-hoo. Aurelia howled dryly. At the end of the day, it was the Windrunner's pride at work. She felt that it was a pity that she couldn't participate in such a battle that only happened once in 10,000 years. But before the battle, who could guarantee that a group of demigods could really defeat a true god? Even if it was a weak true god who had forcefully broken free from a sealed state. If they were not careful, she and Sasha would become pregnant with Duque's posthumous child. You sent William to the Outland. What have you been doing all this time? Sasha asked. Vacation — Duque said grandly. Ah. Didn't you say that the Burning Legion? Duque rolled his eyes. How can it be that fast? Besides, I have an absolutely reliable source of information. Yes, right after he defeated Cyclone, Duque received the first news from the Gemini in Karazhan. Sadly, they had been pushed to the bottom. Their status as Void Lords had been revoked, and they were almost bullied by the other lords. However, seeing that they were familiar with Azeroth, Jaden gave them a new mission. Since there was still time, Duque decided to take a vacation. I'm just a mortal. Even a demigod will get tired and die. I've only had a few days of rest since I started my career at 16. Duque made a lot of sense. Yes. From the end of World War II until Zol's invasion, torturing us at the Wind Lake doesn't count. Torturing us for another 10 years while Karazhan was floating in the void doesn't count either. He. Sasha laughed evilly. Sigh. You're a human. You don't have any consciousness at all. As he spoke, Duque's claws became restless. After being together for more than 10 years, how could they not know what Duque wanted to do? But they just couldn't resist Duque. His sword shone through 19 continents. He defeated the Wind King for 300 rounds. Alright, while William was busy preparing for the expedition, and Sar was busy reorganizing the tribe's economy and people's livelihood, Duque was busy. Morning. Jaina, today I'll study the magic flow model of writing with you. The gentleman Duque warmly greeted his disciple. Jaina, who was busy with supplies, gave Duque a word. Scram. Alright, I'm coming. You. Boo-hoo. Afternoon. Tyrande, let's discuss how to serve the gods. I only serve Alun. Tyrande slapped away Duque's claws and said seriously. I've already asked Alun to help you apply for leave. Boo-hoo. She was betrayed by her own god, again. Tyrande covered her face and didn't want to say anything. Night. Elucia, you and Kalia are here. Duque, we're very busy. The Alliance has fought so many battles, our treasury is enough to play a rat race. Here, I have a good idea to solve the financial deficit. Let's issue paper currency. Like this. Boo-hoo, Duque, we love you to death. Night. Servanas, humph. The best singer is always the last to appear. Hee. In summary, Duque was very busy. In the second half of 22 years after the Dark Portal, the entire Azeroth was licking its wounds. The Alliance had spent all of its savings since the third battle at the Dark Portal in one go, money and resources. Furthermore, during Naxxramaz's rampage in the Eastern Kingdom, it destroyed many villages and killed many civilians. It could be said that apart from training a strong army, the Alliance had suffered a great loss. Chapter 1373. Compared to the Alliance, the Horde suffered even more. Manpower, material resources, and economy were on the verge of collapse. The only good thing was that not only did the Alliance not take advantage of the situation, but they also raised the purchase price of minerals and other materials. And they used the Horde's most scarce food and medicine in direct exchange. They could shamelessly ask the Alliance for supplies. Wujin now felt like a beggar, running to the Alliance every day to ask for disaster relief supplies. But manpower was not enough. Unless all the orcs were genetically modified, it would be impossible for Thrall to create a population of hundreds of thousands in a short period of time. 150,000 adult orcs, 50,000 Tauren, 20,000 trolls, 20,000 Forsaken, 20,000 goblins, and 38,000 goblins. The total adult population of the Horde was less than 300,000, not even as large as a human kingdom. What's worse, this number was a lot of exaggeration. Most of the Horde were rough people, and most of them were illiterate. It was good enough to count up to 3, and those with a little bit of culture ran to be shaman priests. Do you think the shaman would be the ant of the Horde's population statistics? This number was calculated with the help of the unreliable goblins and Forsaken. Because the Horde's territory was sparsely populated, transportation was inconvenient, and many villages did not contact the outside world for 10 days to half a month. No one knew whether or not they had been destroyed. Thrall only knew that help letters were being sent to Orgrimmar, asking for people, food, and wood to build houses. Thrall felt a headache coming on. At this time, the Alliance made an offer that the Horde couldn't refuse, an expedition to the Outland together. In Tanaris, in the Horde's retreat camp, Thrall and a group of chiefs welcomed a visit from Duque. The Outland and Draenor that the Alliance calls, and the Our World that you call, have millions of your orc compatriots, don't they? If the Horde is willing to continue to march with the Alliance and kill the Burning Legion led by Illidan, the Alliance doesn't mind the Horde migrating the orcs to the Horde's territory on the Kalimdor continent. We can even open the portal between the Dark Portal and Theramore so that the immigrants can arrive as soon as possible. When Duque said this, he had a faint smile on his face, as if he was talking about a small matter that had nothing to do with the Alliance. That kind of ease made Sal, Wajin, and Orgrim's eyelids twitch. Their home was about to collapse. The orcs were forced to cross the Dark Portal and launch the first battle of the Dark Portal in an attempt to conquer the world of Azeroth. Ever since Thrall could remember, he had heard such stories. To Sal, the word Our World was both distant and unfamiliar, yet it seemed to be close at hand. Regardless of whether this could be blamed on the conspiracy of the Burning Legion, in the past 25 years, Gul'dan, who had grasped the power of the tribe, abused his dark powers and caused the orcs' homeland to wither. Then, Ner'zhul courted death and blew up the orcs' homeland again. Just by looking at the tragic scene of the Hellfire Peninsula that Duque had provided, Sal and the other tribal elders felt their hearts wrench. It's even more dilapidated than before. Orgrim muttered in a dreamy voice. In the past, the old tribe had gathered an army numbering in the millions and gathered in front of the Gate of Darkness. They wanted to use crude weapons and the strong bodies of the beast men to destroy all their enemies. Unfortunately, the past became nothing in the blink of an eye, and the million-strong army was annihilated. The past was the past, and what was in front of the tribe was a choice that they had no other choice. Privately, every beast man was his brother and sister. Sal could not abandon his compatriots and leave them to die in a world that was being destroyed day by day. Publicly, the addition of millions of beast men could definitely greatly strengthen the strength of the tribe. Any of the chiefs would be good, and there was no reason to refuse. With a few simple eye contact, the tribe had reached an internal consensus. Sal said in his deep voice, "Fight against the evil Burning Legion and save our compatriots. This is the tribe's duty and obligation. The tribe will attack." Duque nodded gently, "Very well." Then, Duque's eyes were like lightning as he swept across the audience. As long as the chiefs were a little weaker, they did not dare to look at Duque's eyes that were full of elemental fluctuations and divinity. They all bowed their heads. I know the tribe still has doubts. Is the alliance too good to the tribe? The wise men, led by Wajin, were silent. Only Wajin raised his head and looked at Duque without fear. Not only him, but every chief was waiting for an answer. Duque smiled coolly. Everyone here, even the chiefs who have fought directly with the Burning Legion, may still have the impression of the Burning Legion when hundreds of thousands of demons swept through Mount Hyjal, right? Grom and the others nodded. With the help of the dimensional dragon king Nozdormu, I went back to the ancient war 10,000 years ago. Duque gently waved his hand, and a three-dimensional projection of the war suddenly appeared in front of the tribal chiefs. Many chiefs gasped on the spot. They saw the incomparably strong boar god Agamagan, with his violent charge, easily knocking a large group of demons into the air, and tearing everything in his way to pieces with his long tusks. In the southern part of the Barren Lands, the core area of the tribe's territory, there were two places, Razor Highland and Razor Swamp. Most of the tribal chiefs had a deep understanding of the ferocity of the boars and the boars there. When they saw Agamagan, who was worshipped by the boars, the shock they felt was far greater than that of other demigods. However, under the siege of tens of thousands of demons, this seemingly invincible demigod finally exhausted his strength and life, and was finally killed by two low-tier void lords. Not only Agamagan, but a large number of demigods, including Malorn the White Deer, who was known as the #1 god of the Azeroth wilderness, died in this battle. The 5-minute video ended very quickly. In the huge tent, only the howling of the Tanaris desert echoed. Duque was clearly calm, but everyone felt that his voice was full of sonorous temperament. In the ancient war, demigods were like dogs, and the strong were everywhere. Do you want an answer? This was the answer. So what if the Alliance let millions of tribes enter the world of Azeroth? It was just a few million more cannon fodder. That's right. When the Burning Legion really invades, millions of tribes are cannon fodder, and so are tens of millions of Alliance members. You are cannon fodder, and even I, a demigod, am cannon fodder. In the face of absolute power of destruction, we are no different. Unknowingly, Sal and the other chiefs' breathing had become heavy. Chapter 1374. Duque, speech continued. But we're also very lucky. Azeroth is the only planet in the vast universe that has a powerful planetary protection spell formation. As long as the spell formation is still functioning, we don't have to worry about the strongest demons of the Burning Legion breaking into Azeroth. Our Karens can't, kill, Jaden can't, and even Sargeras can't. Let's work hard. If we don't want our descendants to be enslaved by demons, and if we don't want our homeland to be destroyed again, we can only work together. Duque's words were like a giant hammer pounding on the hearts of every chief. It was thought-provoking. If Duque had said this during the first battle at the Dark Portal, he would probably have been laughed at. But after experiencing so much, especially after Mount Hyjal, the tribe had a deep understanding of how powerful and terrifying the enemy was. Duke's seemingly overly magnanimous action was ultimately determined by the huge difference in realm and vision between the leader of the Alliance and the leader of the Horde. In front of the Burning Legion, a super-powerful enemy that would become almost impossible to resist if they were not careful, the grudges between the Alliance and the Horde were nothing more than child's play. Duque, we understand. Let the Alliance and the tribe continue to work together to resist the Burning Legion. Thrall punched himself heavily in the chest. I swear that as long as the Alliance doesn't break the Covenant, the tribe will be the Alliance's ally. Duque nodded. I also swear that as long as the tribe doesn't break the Covenant, the Alliance will not take the initiative to attack the tribe. One pair was big, one was small. 4 hands with completely different styles were tightly clasped together. Thrall, you know that I've become a demigod of the weave. I really can't leave now. As for the specific matters of the expedition to the Outer Realm, Varian Rin will come to discuss with the tribe later. Okay. When Duque and Thrall finished discussing the big issues, Grom suddenly stood up. Yo, old friend, what's wrong? Duque asked with a smile. The famous Lord Howl was old. Time had left a deep mark on this legendary hero who had experienced 3 battles at the Dark Portal, Mount Hyjal, and on Karaj. Grom had lost an arm, and a lot of his hair had fallen off. He tied the rest of his hair into a messy bun and tied it behind his head like a spring onion. His once resolute face was now full of wrinkles. His white beard and even his body hair made one's heart ache just by looking at him. Was this still the same Lord Howl who had sent Cenarius to the afterlife with a swing of his axe and instantly killed an abyssal lord? Duque did not speak. His heart was filled with complicated emotions. It was his intervention that prevented this legendary hero from dying before the Battle of Mount Hyjal. It was also because of his actions that he truly understood what it meant to be a hero past his prime. In the entire battle of Karaj, Grom did not perform well at all. Perhaps letting Grom die as he did in history was the best ending for an incomparably courageous orc warrior. On the surface, Duque was expressionless, but his heart was filled with regret. Grom caught Duque's thoughts very well. Grom Hellscream was never a sensitive person. When a person got older, they would see many things that they could not see when they were young. Grom's face suddenly twitched. His shoulders trembled, but he still spoke. His voice was filled with a strange power, as if it brought everyone back to the long river of history. The first half of my life I fought for the clan, and the second half for the tribe. I've made many mistakes. I was the first to drink demon blood and massacre humans. I even accidentally killed the demigod Cenarius, causing the tribe to fall into a passive position. I've been in pain, lost myself in the demon blood addiction. But I've never regretted it, because I swore that for the rest of my life, I would cut down the tribe's enemies with my axe. Now it seems that I'm not far from achieving this goal." When Grom said this, all the chiefs, including Sal, fell silent. Grom's battle strength was declining, visible to the naked eye. His movements were sluggish, and his strength weakened. As a result, he was no longer the spearhead of the tribe's attacks. This was the inevitable outcome for every orc warrior who did not die on the battlefield. In the past, everyone had seen too many warriors like this. Normally, they would even fight to be the vanguard in order to end themselves. Or they would challenge a publicly recognized powerful monster to prove themselves, or they would forever disappear from the sight of their own kind. Grom longed for the final glory, but he could never get it. Even the true deity Thun had died, but he was still living in this world. This time, he had suffered some internal damage. Even the holy light and shaman's power could not heal him. Healing magic could repair the body, but it could not fight against aging. He was almost 60 years old. Orc warriors were usually bad at math. Even he did not know how old he was. But this age, even for shamans who rarely went to the front lines, was extremely old. It was foreseeable that if there was a next battle, his performance would be even worse. Sal could vaguely guess why Grom's actions were like this. Grom turned around and said to Sal, "Great Chief, I'm old. It's very likely that I can no longer serve the tribe." Sal wanted to comfort Grom, but he did not know where to start. Beside him, Orgrim's mouth twitched for a while. Perhaps he wanted to persuade him to become a Death Knight, but Orgrim remained silent. An old and frail orc hero, even if he became a forgotten warrior, would not be very strong. Orgrim himself was the best example. His current strength could not be compared to his strength 22 years ago. Thrall finally let out a long sigh. "Grom, you did a good job. The tribe thanks you for your 20 years of fighting. If there's anything else you want to do, go ahead and do it." "Thank you, Great Chief." Grom knelt on the ground and kowtowed heavily. When he stood up again, there was no longer any confusion on his face. He turned to look at Duque. "Orcs will take revenge and repay kindness. I owe you my life. It seems that I will never be able to repay it in this lifetime." "You don't actually have to." Duque stopped mid-sentence. He saw Grom's fiery eyes. "My life belongs to the tribe. Before my life ends, even the last second, it has nothing to do with you, Duke Marcus. But from the moment my life ends, I swear that my soul will belong to you. As long as it is not against the tribe, you can order me around forever. I, Grom Hellscream, will never complain." Chapter 1375. That's right. Being loyal to Duque, a demigod, could theoretically grant him many benefits, such as eternal life and power. However, Duque never thought that someone as staunch as Grom would submit to him for something that mortals yearned for but could not obtain. A true hero did not care about life and death. To have such an outcome, it could only be said, "You reap what you sow." There was no Duque who saved Grom's life time and time again. There was no Duque who handled the relationship with the Horde fairly. There was no way he could gain the loyalty of a legendary hero like Grom. To this day, even if Grom died of old age in his bed, he would still be the greatest hero of the Horde, and would be remembered by countless descendants. If Grom chose to repay the debt of gratitude, it would instead cause him to have the possibility of losing his illustrious reputation. The Beastmen could not accept a hero who sold his soul after death, even if this hero had contributed greatly to the Horde. Without the interference of the Devil's blood, the Beastmen's values had returned to before they fell into madness. It was the typical way of nature, where the soul returned to the earth and longed for the blessings of their ancestors. Although they could reluctantly accept a forgotten one like Orgrim who had come back from the dead, it did not mean that they respected him from the bottom of their hearts. This natural conflict between life and death was not something that could be easily resolved. Therefore, Grom's actions were a contradiction in itself. The glory of the Horde? Or his own principles? His actions could not be said to be wrong, nor could they be said to be right. However, no one could deny that if the legendary hero Grom became a sole messenger under Duque, it would undoubtedly deepen the bond between the Horde and the Alliance. It was very likely that this would become a completely new bridge that could not be estimated. To the Horde, who was on the weaker side, this might be an opportunity. At this moment, everyone looked at Duque. Duque had a faint smile on his lips, but what was more eye-catching was his open arms. I am not a hypocrite. Under my command, I have a black witch who has done many evil things, a holy knight who has turned into a monster, and a frost dragon who once ravaged the continent. Why can't I have a beastman hero? As long as you have the same goal of fighting against the Burning Legion and protecting Azeroth, I welcome all powerful people to join. So, welcome, Grom. Duque. Unknowingly, Grom felt himself choking up. In this life, he had never knelt to anyone. Even if it was 2 generations of great chieftains, he would only bow to them and hit his sturdy chest with his fist. But at this moment, he had the urge to kneel down on one knee. Not because of loyalty, not because of the formal master-servant relationship, but because of Duque's magnanimity in abandoning hatred and narrow national prejudice for the sake of the world. As soon as he bent down, he found himself hugged by Duque. In terms of physique, it looked ridiculous. Although Duque was more than 1.8 meters tall, he was still like a child hugging an adult to a burly orc who was 2.4 meters tall. Grom froze for a moment, then bent down and used his remaining right arm to gently pat Duque's back. It had nothing to do with race or identity. They were comrades who shared the same goal. Paw. Paw. Clap, clap, clap. As the chief, Sal was the first to applaud. The deep and resounding applause woke everyone from their stupor. With Sal taking the lead, the other chiefs started to follow in this rather human way of encouragement. Palms the size of palms started to clap. Congratulations, Grom. Orgrim said from the bottom of his heart. It was a pity that Undead didn't have tears, or else he might have shed tears of excitement. Congratulations, Grom. Sal had a sincere smile on his face. He felt very conflicted. The chief he trusted the most was about to reach the end of his life, but he had chosen a path that no other orc had taken before. Perhaps this would be the start of a new glory, or perhaps an unknown tribulation and curse. Even if he didn't think that Duque would look down on Grom, what if the alliance and tribe fell out in the future? Thinking of this, Sal couldn't suppress the anxiety in his heart. However, as long as he was still the chief, the tribe would not go down the wrong path and go against the alliance, right? After the hug, Duque turned to Sal. I still have work to do. I need to focus on the expansion and stability of the magic net in the next few days. If it's about the situation with Azeroth, please look for Magni. If it's about the Outland expedition, please look for Varian. Understood. Duque left. As a new demigod, he had as many things to do as there were stars in the sky. After Duque left, Grom announced that he would openly accept disciples in Orgrimmar. He wanted to use the last moments of his life to pass on his martial arts and techniques to the next generation. When he was alive, he belonged to the tribe. After death, he served Duque. In Silithus, the evacuation was still ongoing. The insectoids swore loyalty to Duque. To many people, this wasn't absolute insurance. Duque didn't object and agreed to keep the Cenarian fortress. He also promised to strengthen the railway from Tanaris to Ungoro Crater, and then to Silithus. Firstly, it was to monitor them, and secondly, it would increase the Alliance's territory. Sending the insectoids of Karaj to the Door of Darkness thousands of miles away was definitely a huge project. The insectoid stamina wasn't unlimited. They had huge bodies and powerful combat power, but the price they had to pay was an astonishing amount of food. If they really migrated with the insectoids, it would probably be no different from the Karaj insectoids sweeping through the Kalandor continent. Thinking of this, Duque felt a headache coming on. Tens of thousands of insectoids couldn't use the portal at all. Otherwise, even a demigod like Duque wouldn't be able to handle the shocking mana consumption. But there was a way. Emperor Vecnolus smiled and gave Duque an idea. Master, you only want the insectoids to be mounts and combat power in the outland. Why don't you transport the eggs to the Door of Darkness and hatch them? Oh, there was such a thing? Duque blushed. All right, your suggestion isn't bad. But I'm worried that the cursed land where the Door of Darkness is located will affect the will of the new Karaj insectoids. Set the hatching point at the intersection of the Land of Sorrow and Upwind Path. The Land of Sorrows was the Swamp of Sorrows. In order to ensure the supply line between the Stormwind Kingdom and the Overwatch Fort, more than half of the Swamp of Sorrows had disappeared since the third year of the Dark Portal. It had become a military field. Only the Temple of Hacker in the east and the Pool of Tears around the temple were left, as well as the swamp. The cursed land in the south wouldn't work, and although Hacker had died in the east, there was no guarantee that there would be any will left after his death to trick the Alliance. So, setting the hatching point next to Karazhan was also to monitor them. This was the best choice. Master is wise. Vecnolus bowed. Chapter 1376. After handing over the Alliance's affairs, Duque opened a portal to Darnassus and visited the moon goddess Elun in the moon goddess temple. Under the night sky, Duque waited for the goddess will to arrive. There was no overbearing aura, no supreme majesty. There was only a gentle aura, just like the moonlight that was as clear as water. Thank you, Duke Marcus. You've done a lot for this world. I'm glad that you've once again proven that my foresight was right. If giving Tyron to Duque in the ancient war 10,000 years ago was a little like throwing the kin away, Elun was more gratified now. After spending more than 10,000 years together, she had long treated Tyrande as her own daughter. In fact, she had spent more time with Tyrande than she had with her own son, Cenarius. Duque raised his head and nodded. Everything is for Azeroth. The goddess gave a heartfelt compliment. Ah. That's rare. You must know that many gods of the wilderness do not have your awareness. I rose because of Azeroth, and because of it, I'm extraordinary. My thoughts and will in this regard should be the same as yours, Elun. Indeed. Why did you call me here this time? Digging out the abscess of the world is a good thing in the long run. But in the short run, the damaged will of the world will sleep. As one of the few existences in this world that can influence the situation, you and I hope to protect this world during this period of healing. Naturally. I've heard of the Alliance's plan to attack Draenor. What I'm trying to say is that you can't leave Azeroth. I know that this request may be a little excessive, but I can feel evil spying on Azeroth. Not only the unknown enemy, even the Lich King Arthas in the extreme north woke up the moment we killed Seat Thun. Hearing the goddess' words, Duque frowned. The Alliance had yet to recover, and the magic net had just been built. That was why Duque had sent William to fight the front lines. In Duque's mind, it wouldn't be a problem for William to fight against people like Vashj. It would be irresponsible of him to deal with Illidan, who had just absorbed a large amount of evil and was at his peak. Duque wasn't sure if there was such a thing as a protagonist halo in this world. In any case, the original world-destroying third cultivator of true virtue, Pharaoh Khadgar, had long since died. This was an indisputable fact. If William, who was supposed to become the leader of the Alliance, died prematurely in the Outland, Duque would be at fault. On the other hand, since Elun had mentioned Arthas, Duque had to be on his guard. No one could guarantee that Arthas would wait until both Illidan and Kil'jaeden were kneeling before her. What was an ambitious and ruthless person? An ambitious and ruthless person could do what others couldn't. Ambitious people could endure and wait, but they would never sit and wait for death. If he discovered that Duque was preparing to launch a blitzkrieg attack on Delano's Ice Crown Fortress, Arthas would immediately jump out to fight with Duque even if he was not in his complete form. Phew. Duque let out a long sigh and thought about it again. He looked at Tyrande, who was beside him, and met her expectant eyes. All right. I promise you. Elun heaved a sigh of relief. A wise and reasonable decision. Delano's star soul has already been annihilated. Even if you use your main body to descend there, you will only be a slightly stronger mortal. If you encounter any misfortune, the divinity of Azeroth that you possess will instead become the key for the Burning Legion to open the protective array of planet Azeroth. Duque understood what Elun meant. If he used his main body, he wouldn't gain much even if he won, and if he lost, he would even lose his pants. If it was in the past, he would naturally not be afraid of those who wore shoes. With nothing, it was easy to be fearless. Now that Duque had a large family business, he had started a harem of the highest quality in all of Azeroth. It was precisely because he had something to protect that he had the motivation to be the world's guardian. He knew that it was likely to be a trap, but he still foolishly jumped into it. He obviously couldn't win this kind of deal. Illidan's Stormrage is very strong now. He isn't someone that other mortals can easily deal with. Is there any way? The moonlight in the sky flickered for a moment. It was clearly just an illusory female projection. Ilun seemed to smile slyly. If you promise not to kidnap my high priest before you become a true god, I will teach you a little magic. Duque was speechless. Sure enough, she saw through me. Duque came this time to listen to Elun's thoughts, and also to officially take Tyrant away. The leader of the Night Elves was his lover, which was fine. But his lover was the high priest of another god, which was a little troublesome. Duque and Elun both knew that there was no conflict of interest between them, and it should be fine to be long-term allies. But Tyrant's existence obviously involved a conflict of doctrine. The high priest was the highest representative of a god in the mortal world, and his faith and ability were absolutely impeccable. On the other hand, because of absolute faith, a god only needed a thought to destroy his high priest. Duque didn't want the sword of Damocles to hang around Tyrant's neck all day, so it was necessary for Tyrant to change her faith. Even if she didn't believe in him, becoming a non-believer or something else would be better than now. This was a matter of principle. Duque didn't even mention this to Tyrant. Instead, Elun revealed it after thinking about it. Goddess, I have never thought of abandoning my faith in you. Tyrant was at a loss. Child, this has nothing to do with loyalty. It's rare for a powerful demigod to appear in Azeroth, and she has a strong will to fight against evil. As long as you don't object, I am willing to see you become our bond. The moonlight shone down gently, like a mother's hand, gently stroking Tyrant's green hair. This, Elun looked at Duque again. But Tyrant has served me for more than 10,000 years. Everyone in the Night Elves and Cenarian Circle has accepted this fact. It won't be easy to change. Tyrant has to at least cultivate an outstanding successor. At least you have to become a true god. Only then will it be easier for Tyrant to take that step. Duque bowed slightly. Your wisdom is unparalleled. I agree. Thank you for your understanding. Elun sent a strand of her will into Duque's sea of consciousness. After discussing the situation in Azeroth a little more, the will of the goddess disappeared. Duque, you. Tyrant's expression was extremely complicated. Elun is a kind goddess. Can't you see that she is also blessing us? Duque gently pulled Tyrant into his arms. Unknowingly, their fingers were intertwined. After a long time. You should go back first. My mind is in a mess. Okay. That night, Duque did not stay overnight and returned to Karazhan. Chapter 1377. Back in the heart of Karazhan, Duque sat on the throne of elements. How are the users of the weave responding? Duque could easily monitor the situation of the weave, but he could not communicate directly with the users like Khadgar could. Khadgar deliberated for a second or two. Most of them praised this as an epic-making feat. It's simple, fast, and safe. The only problem is that they want to increase the upper limit of mana usage and lower the requirements for using magic. Reject them. We are not the Church of Holy Light that saves everyone. Greedy people who do not follow the rules of equivalent exchange will be punished, from cutting off the weave to killing them. Duque made the decision on the spot. Understood. Emperor Wickler nodded. Cursing people was not something he liked. Killing people was what he liked. The swarm of insects did not have complicated thoughts. Those that did not listen were always killed. Since they had recognized Duque as their master, they could only obey. After dealing with a few urgent problems, Duque began to rearrange the distribution of the weave. In Duque's mind, the weave was not only the internet of the magic world, but also a warning net. It was a permanent shield that could provide support to his mages at any time, allowing them to cast powerful spells. In the early stages of the weave, it was easy to set up controlled mana channels in the main cities. However, once the weave was formed, it could not be so simple to inject elements. The spiritual force that mages contributed to the weave could not be casually recycled either. All power had to be guided and filtered in a standardized manner. This was like a water plant. After taking a large amount of water from a clean source, it could not be sent to thousands of households. First, it needed to be filtered. From the simplest sedimentation tank, to a high-density filter, and then to a chemical disinfection process. Then, it needed to be tested, from microbes and bacteria to chemical substances. Finally, the finished water could be released and flowed into the hands of the users. What Duque wanted to do was very similar to a water plant. In the past, mages simply and crudely drew elements from the elemental realm into their bodies, combining them with the mana in their magic circuits, and then releasing them to form magic. This was a serious problem of insufficient filtration. In order to attract all the mages to use the weave, it first had to be pure. At the same time, he used the recovered mental strength to unify the mental strength and imprint the will of the entire Demon King. This would effectively prevent the weave from being abused by outsiders or having its control stolen. Lastly, why were magic incantations so long? It was not because it required so many incantations to use the elements, but because it required so many incantations to make the elements stable and controllable. Since ancient times, magic researchers had racked their brains in order to make magic compound reactions and prevent the magic elements from destroying a mage's body as much as possible. In order to surpass these pioneers in magic, the weave needed to be able to construct a magic model in the shortest time possible after a mage made a request to cast a spell, and then deliver it to the mage safely and quickly. After achieving these 3 points, the final key was to have a wide coverage area. This was just like a cell phone. No matter how beautiful a cell phone was, it would be useless if there was no signal. How to expand the weave in every corner of Azeroth was Duque's future task. It was foreseeable that this would be a very long process. Phew. Fortunately, I still have time. After Duque expressed his thoughts and design intentions, the rest was left to the elemental emissaries to discuss and implement. Returning to his bedroom, Duque found that Jaina was already there. It's rare that you're here so early. I thought you'd be busy for a while. Duque was not joking. There were so many kings in the alliance, but Jaina was definitely the busiest one. When the Horde suffered a disaster, most of the alliance's aid was first transported to Theramore, and then transferred to small boats or offshore flatboats. Later, once the orcs migrated from the outer realm, the orcs from the dark portal would also be sent to Theramore through the portal in the watchtower. Basically, there were as many things that needed Jaina's personal approval as there were stars in the sky. Jaina combed her brilliant blonde hair and revealed a charming smile. Please, the person who called me here is my most respected teacher, the man I love the most. Even if you were bored and suddenly wanted to discuss the flow of magic under the M-shaped posture, I had to come. Duque face-bombed. Am I such a person who can't distinguish between public and private matters? Jaina smiled without saying anything. It was clear that she was saying, you are. All right, there's a change of plans. I'm not going to the outer realm. I was going to go, but Elun persuaded me not to. While the soul of Azeroth is asleep, she doesn't want me to leave Azeroth. I was going to persuade you even if Elun didn't say so. Since you've already made your decision, that's even better. What's your new plan now? I'm going to expand the magic net with all my might. I don't think I'll be able to leave. Help me open the dark portal. Okay. July 5th, 22nd year of the Dark Portal. The Alliance and the Horde decided to send out an allied army again. This time, the Horde sent out 40,000 troops, led by Thrall himself. They joined the Alliance's 50,000 troops and gathered at the Dark Portal. The huge portal in front of them exuded an ominous aura. The dry, crimson land was filled with an excessively clean air. There was no life, no aura, not even a smell. Thrall, who was born in a human kingdom, had thought that the terrible barren lands or the dry Silithus desert were the worst places. He didn't expect this cursed land to bring him an even greater shock. Is this the door of darkness in the cursed lands? Thrall murmured. Yes. Our people are on the other side of the portal, Orgrim said softly. It's time. Not far away, Varian was riding a red, four-legged insect. It looked black, with sharp insect horns and long, sharp legs that didn't match Varian's silver-white armor. However, since both the Alliance and the Horde were the same, there was no need to laugh at each other. Thrall nodded at Varian. William pulled out one of his artifact swords and raised it up high. The sunlight reflected off the blade, giving off a dazzling radiance. Not far away, Jaina, who was standing on a magic formation on a high platform, started chanting an incantation. It was a restriction placed on the dark portal, preventing it from obtaining power from anywhere around it. Inside the huge door, there was an illusory mix of black and green waves, like tumbling mud. In the next moment, before the portal was completely formed, countless demons pounced out of the dark portal. Chapter 1378. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, accompanied by the piercing sound of the wind, black cannonballs flew across the sky not far from the Allied army. They were like a flock of migrating birds, covering the sky and the sun. However, they flew lower and lower. They were so densely packed according to the predetermined shooting pattern, like a black blanket covering the top of the demon army. The floating fortress Naxxramas, plus the watchtower artillery position that stretched for several kilometers, thousands of giant cannons fired at the same time, forming a barrage that turned the entire sky into a black tide, slapping fiercely into the turbulence formed by the demons. The process of the shell explosion seemed to be very slow. Even 2 or 3 kilometers away, it could be clearly seen that the huge demons were blown apart, and then the broken limbs and wreckage exploded into the sky. The slowness was just an optical illusion. With the crimson ground as the background, waves of shells screeched through the void, and some stray shells even brushed over the coalition army formation, exploding into the open space in front of the formation, sending dirt and gravel soaring into the sky. This was not the first time he had seen the Alliance's artillery formation. Every time he saw it, he still felt his blood surge and couldn't control himself. Sal was suddenly glad that the tribal warriors didn't have to brave such terrible artillery fire to attack the Alliance's position. Long-range artillery cleansing. Sniper arrows shooting. Magic saturation attack. Spear volley piercing. Without passing through these 4 lines of death, it was impossible to touch the Alliance's position. However, now the unlucky ones were the demons of the Burning Legion. There were a few blind elite demons who tried to rush over with the shells, but they didn't end up any better than the previous ordinary demons. The Alliance had larger caliber artillery, and as long as they weren't immune to fire damage or had a wide area, protective shell, magic shield, they would die. Sure enough, in less than half a minute, those guys were blown to pieces by small steel cannon, level mortars. Sal was a little worried that such a fierce artillery attack would destroy the dark portal together. However, he saw a scene that surprised him. Under the fierce artillery attack, the dark portal did flicker in the fire, as if it would collapse at any time, but this didn't happen. An unexplainable magical power repelled the cannonballs flying in all directions. In the center of the field of vision, it stood there. In his perception, it didn't exist. The dark portal was a special existence that seemed to be located in the center of the cursed lands, but it was actually located in a different spatial dimension. The violent bombardment continued. The demons collided with the cannonballs, and broken limbs and flesh rained down like a downpour. In the end, even the tribal army was a little numb. The orc warriors yawned, and the Tauren warriors scratched their buttocks. It was as if the Alliance's cannons were not powerful demons that could slaughter an entire village, but a group of moving targets. The bombardment lasted for about 10 minutes, and then Jaina's voice came through the magic transmission. There aren't many demons left. The artillery fire ceased within a minute. Thousands of cannons fired continuously. The scene was quite shocking, but it was a pity that the cost was astronomical. If it wasn't for the recent introduction of a new currency nicknamed Azeroth RMB, with gold as collateral, which was very popular and unanimously recognized by the Alliance tribes, to a certain extent filling the empty national treasuries through the issuance of additional currency, the Alliance quartermaster and internal affairs officer would probably have to jump into the river. Woo woo woo, the orc trumpeter blew a huge horn, and the desolate and heroic sound of the horn echoed in the cursed lands. That was the sound of the horn to attack. Attack! Sal raised the hammer of destruction high, squeezed his legs on the white-furred wolf under him, and led the charge forward. It had to be said that on a battlefield full of huge pits that were more than a meter deep, the wolf mount was better than the Alliance's warhorses. The large pit that the steam tank would lie in could be crossed by the wolf with a light leap, and as a native breed of Draenor, there was no problem of acclimatization. As long as there was enough meat, the wolf was one of the most ideal mounts in the Outer Lands. Fortunately, the Alliance didn't have to rely on the Envy tribe this time. Seeing that the tribal army quickly drowned out the scattered demons in front of the Door of Darkness, and then entered the Door of Darkness in an orderly manner, William clamped the slightly hard abdomen of the insect, and the insect that looked like a small car with a black base and red rings immediately strode forward with its 4 long, sickle-like legs. As soon as he passed through the Door of Darkness, he suddenly felt a sense of weightlessness, as if he was falling from a high altitude. However, it was only for a moment, and he and the insect quickly turned into a stream of light, crossing the void that was measured in units of light years. When he came back to his senses, he was already on the back of the insect, on a long and wide illusory passage, charging towards the space outside the Door of Darkness. Outside the door, there was a pitch-black sky with a fiery red base. In front of the Alliance soldiers, reflected in their vision, 2 armies were engaged in a life-and-death battle on the similarly red land in front of them. All the sounds of battle seemed to be isolated by an invisible wall of air. The moment William led the vanguard knights of the Griffin Legion out of the Door of Darkness, the earth-shattering sound waves were like crashing waves crashing against the shore. It violently impacted everyone's eardrums. What William saw was a huge Lord of the Abyss, a stone giant that was covered in green flames, and a large number of evil demon guards and doomsday guards. The only fortunate thing was that the number of these evil demons wasn't so high that it would make people feel hopeless. Sensing the arrival of the Alliance, Thrall consciously moved the battle line towards the north of the Door of Darkness. Alliance, attack! William took the lead and attacked towards the south. The Alliance army surged out of the Door of Darkness like a tide. First, it was the cavalry riding on the insects, followed by the Kiraj flying insect army led by Shachla, followed by the mages, and finally, the heavy and clumsy artillery regiment. In the Alliance army, no one noticed an ordinary mage. Ah! A male human mage who looked less than 20 years old almost fell off his horse. An Alliance knight beside him reacted quickly and pulled him up. The 2 of them quickly left the main road and dismounted to rest. There was a group of people who had just finished teleporting but were not feeling well. Be careful, mage. If you fall off your horse during the charge, you'll most likely die. Thank you. The young mage straightened his mage crown and saw the emblem on the other party's armor. Storm Guardian? Yes. My ancestors were Highland Knights of Torrential Castle. I'm Thomas. What about you? The young mage also showed the emblem on his mage robe. Mage Mark Dooku from Theramore sends his regards. Chapter 1379. Karazhan, Magic Training Room. After injecting highly concentrated liquid mana into the magic circuit in Jaina's body and training her to the point where she was barely breathing, Duque ended the night's lesson with satisfaction. Wiping away Jaina's sweat, Duque showed her a new spell. This is Jaina, who was tired and sleepy, suddenly opened her eyes wide. She saw a person in the huge 108-inch curved magic mirror projection. Even if it was just a back view, Jaina would never mistake it for Duke's back view. Gianna was certain that this was a real-time image, because she could see the Varian trio attacking from the far end of the image. Jaina knew that the allied forces of the Alliance and the Horde were fighting against the Burning Legion at the gate of the Dark Portal in the Outland. Jaina directly contacted the mages in the Outland through a magic message and opened another real-time image. She was immediately shocked to find that there was no delay between the two images. That meant that there was indeed another Duque at the Dark Portal. Jaina turned her head in shock and looked at Duque, who was smirking. "Who's that guy?" "That's a character that I made with my own hands." Jaina was completely dumbfounded. There was only one sentence in her mind. Is that even possible? Duque shrugged. "I can't help it. I can't leave Azeroth. Even if I send a clone with my soul, it might be captured by the place and have its information stolen, leading to terrible consequences. So, I made a clone that looked exactly like me and sent it over." With that, Duque sat on a comfortable chair and gestured for Jaina to sit over. When Jaina intimately sat between Duque's legs and leaned against Duque's chest, Duque handed her a magic crystal ball. Jaina took it and immersed her mind in the crystal ball. She immediately understood what the Duque near the Dark Portal was. It was a magic construct wrapped in flesh and skin. In essence, this Duque was no different from Kuel Salas's magic puppet in Silvery Moon City. The only key was that this magic construct was directly controlled by Duque 24/7. The amazing thing was that Duque had equipped this clone with a complete stomach and even a complete blood circulation system. It seemed like it needed to eat, drink, and defecate. It seemed like this clone could still be injured or even die. In reality, what was important was the magic core that replaced the heart, liver, and spleen. This clone not only provided the circulation of Morning Star magic, but it could also instantly raise the clone's strength to the Radiant Moon rank through magic transmission. This clone also had a soul, but it was the soul of a wizard Kurtiras who had died in battle. Duque had put it inside. All the feelings of the doppelganger would be directly fed back to Duke in Karazhan, and all the movements would be done by Duke himself. Jaina was shocked. Can this level of remote control really be done? Duque pursed his lips. As long as the transmission of magic between Azeroth and the Outer Realm is not cut off. There is indeed a problem with the situation over there. Fortunately, my design looks perfect for now. Duque explained it to Jaina in detail. The core of all remote control was the network. Only when the network was stable and powerful enough could the control delay be lowered to an acceptable level. Duque first asked Solarian to place a weave core near the Dark Portal in the Outer Realm. It could be seen as a magical version of a cell phone signal base station. With this as the core, the weave was laid out. Since Draenor had already exploded, the Outer Realm was no longer a planet, but a half of the planet's crust that had lost its core and was suspended in the void. Although there was still gravity and air on the surface of the planet because of its large mass, not only had the planet lost its master, but even the ordinary laws had begun to collapse. Thus, from time to time, islands could be seen floating in mid-air in the distance, or lightning energy scattered in all directions. Duque had easily let the weave invade Draenor, which also gave him a wake-up call. If he could do it so easily, the Burning Legion could also set a terrible trap for him by changing the laws of Draenor's world. Of course, now that Duque had gone to a clone without self-awareness, no matter how he tricked it, he would not be able to trick Duque himself. At this moment, Jaina was very curious about this new remote control system. Intelligence was a very key quality for a mage to grow. What are those two numbers that keep jumping up and down? FPS. Ping. Jaina pointed to the upper right corner of the projection screen. When Duque saw this, he secretly stuck out his tongue, sweating in his heart. He could only explain slowly. FPS refers to the number of times the mirror image refreshes per second. For now, the maximum is 60. The higher the value, the better. The higher it is, the smoother it will be, and if it's low, the image will feel sluggish. Ping is the delay of what happens in Draenor being transmitted to us. The lower the delay, the better. If the delay is low, you'll get a response almost immediately when you give an order. If the delay is high, it'll be 200,300. You'll find that when you give an order, it'll take 1 or 2 seconds before there's a response. By then, the character will be finished. Oh, yes, the lowest delay is 0. Oh, I see. Duque, I really admire you. Where did you get so many wonderful ideas? Did you get them from the Titan's relics? No, I'm a transmigrator. If I wasn't careful, I'd accidentally brought things out of the game through the system genie. On the surface, Duque had a better idea. It has nothing to do with the Titans, okay? Who told your master to be the #1 magic genius in Azeroth? Very arrogant and asking for a beating. But inspiration was the most mysterious thing. Success was 1% inspiration and 99% sweat. This was true, but there was another sentence behind it. There were many people who were willing to pay 99% of the sweat, but very few people had that 1% inspiration. In the face of Duque's arrogance, Jaina could only twist her slender waist seductively and roll her eyes at Duque. Jaina was very smart. She quickly discovered that Duque's clone could be controlled through extremely simple operations. With just a thought, Duque's clone could move forward, backward, left, and right. It was even easier to release magic. For example, by pressing shortcut key 1, the little person in the image could chant spells and start to release frost arrows. You can use your mind to directly control the whole process. Why do you use these? Duque put his arm around Jaina's waist. I get tired of it sometimes. Maybe I'll ask the elemental emissary to help watch my character. Jaina was dumbfounded. There was actually such a suffocating operation. Chapter 1380. It wasn't through divine power, but pure magic to control a character that could be considered his clone. Who knew how many galaxies away, but controlling the entire situation, other than Duque, there was no one else who could play such a difficult game. Gianna was convinced of Duke's abilities. When are you going to get me a clone like this to play with? Please forgive me for refusing, Duque said firmly. Why? What if you lose, and your character is desecrated? Even though I know it's not you, I'll still be upset. What green forgiveness? That was the most annoying. Jaina rolled her eyes and didn't insist. In her eyes, not every mage was called Duke Marcus, and not every mage had the shocking talent of casting multiple spells. Let's not talk about Karazhan for now. In the dark portal, Duque's clone, who had changed his name to Mark Dooku, clearly transmitted all his senses to the main body. Boom! A huge green stone fell from the sky. It directly smashed a steam tank, and the broken metal parts flew everywhere, causing a second wave of damage to the surrounding Alliance soldiers. The crowd simply fell to the ground one after another. Damn! Hellfire! The knight called Thomas raised his shield and very considerately protected himself and the mage who called himself Mark. Shield wall? Are you also a professional? Duque asked. Let me emphasize, in the standard sense, a knight was a noble title between a noble and a commoner. Cavalry was a soldier, while holy knights were professionals. Yes, a mid-level warrior. Right, can you deal with that thing? Thomas pointed his sword at the hellfire monster that quickly turned from a large stone into a green giant bathed in fire. Don't joke. Mages would be exhausted if they could win against that. In fact, they didn't even need to do anything. There was an Alliance second lieutenant who shouted, Holy Light Iron Fist. Who has the Holy Light Iron Fist? The full name of the Holy Light Iron Fist was, Highly Concentrated Holy Light Shoulder-Type Demon Fighting Weapon. Because it looked like a rocket launcher with the word Iron Fist on it, the soldiers called it the Holy Light Iron Fist. This was light equipment that the Alliance had specially developed for ordinary soldiers without holy light and mana to fight against large demons. A rocket filled with highly concentrated Stratholme holy water was inserted into a simple hollow iron tube as thick as an arm. With a small amount of gunpowder sealed at the tail of the rocket to ignite, the anti-demon rocket could be launched 50 meters away. Of course, due to the lack of accuracy, the Holy Light rocket launcher would basically fly away after exceeding 30 meters. But it didn't matter, because it was filled with holy water, and the bullets were made of fragile plastic. As long as it wasn't a demon warlock or a vital point that was hit, even if a person was hit, other than a slight dizziness, it was no different from taking a bath. They didn't even have to worry about accidentally injuring someone. The moment the Iron Fist of Holy Light was launched, it received a lot of praise from the middle and lower-ranking soldiers. Without the support of heavy weapons, it was still better than fighting the demons with swords and spears. The Hellfire, which was more than 3 stories tall, discovered these short creatures and shot a few beams of light at them. It did not dodge. As a meat shield in the Burning Legion's charge, the word dodge never existed in its mind. Using the Iron Fist of Holy Light to fight it was as easy as shooting a target during training. Several Holy Light missiles left a long trail of golden flames behind as they plunged headfirst into the Hellfire's huge body. It was very eye-catching. The ferocious body of the Hellfire suddenly stopped, and then in a short second, rays of golden light escaped from its body. Bang! With a loud bang, the whole Hellfire was blown to pieces in front of nearly 100 Alliance soldiers. Ha ha ha! Long live the Alliance! Long live Duke Marcus! The thrill of defeating a monster that was larger than one could imagine was indescribable. Thomas, like the other Alliance soldiers, shouted excitedly and whistled. Only then did he realize that the young mage behind him wasn't very surprised. You've seen the Hellfire with your own eyes? Mark Dooku, who was being controlled by Duque, smiled. I saw it on Mount Hyjal. Oh. That's amazing. Brothers, protect this young mage, Lord Dooku. He experienced the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Wow. Amazing. The soldiers beside him chimed in. A situation that even Duque didn't expect happened. The soldiers around him spontaneously formed a circle with him as the center. Seeing Duque's dumbfounded look, Thomas smiled. Don't be surprised. This is just the experience of everyone in the war. We're not the lucky Stormwind or Lordaeron, and we're not dwarves or elves either. The scattered soldiers of the other small countries are used to grouping around the strong. Duque understood immediately. Even today, the Alliance still claimed to be the 11 kingdoms, but only he himself knew how much of an exaggeration it was. Originally, among the 7 human kingdoms, Gilneas had left the Alliance after World War II and had been closed off. There were only 6 left. Even though all of the 7 kingdoms had had their capital destroyed, Stormwind, which was the first to be destroyed, recovered the best. Today, because of Duque's existence, the 6 human kingdoms in the Alliance had long been divided into different levels. Stormwind was the strongest, Lordaeron and Dalajan were second, Kurtiras and Alterac were a level lower, and the weakest was naturally Stormguard, which hadn't even recovered its kingdom title. The people of Stormguard were also tired. After Duke Marcus, who was born as a commoner, became the uncrowned king of the Alliance, the nobility had faded a lot. However, ideas that had settled down for 2,800 years were not so easy to change. When Torrential Fortress was destroyed, their disappointing king, Garen Trollbane, died at the hands of the Scourge army, and was humiliated into becoming a servant of the Lich King. Thinking about how awesome Garen's father, King Salas, was, beating up the trolls was as easy as drinking water. Compared to this brainless and cowardly person, the brave Highlanders felt extremely aggrieved. Restoring a kingdom was not an easy task. Even if the Alliance's commander, Duque, had already said that he would support the people of Stormguard to restore their kingdom, they still needed a king. Unlike the Berev family in Alterac, the few old Highland nobles were basically the same in terms of reputation and power. It could be said that none of them were willing to submit to the others. At this time, the higher-ups of the Alliance revealed that the Highland hero of the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, Daneth Trollbane, was not only the nephew of the late King Salas, but also bravely led the vanguard to attack Draenor for the Alliance. The people of Stormguard were instantly excited. Chapter 1381. Starting out as a commoner, he was just a small militia captain at first, and became famous in the Battle of Solder Bridge and the counterattack on the wetlands. Later, unwilling to be lonely, he gave up fighting for power in his own country, and guarded the dark portal for the humans for more than 10 years. In the end, he killed his way into Draenor. No matter how one looked at it, Donna's Trollbane was the true hero who inherited the title of Trollbane Killer. Even when he re-established contact with the Outland, Donna's personally refused to be crowned king, and announced that he was only willing to fight for humans and the Alliance. That's right, the most important reason Donna's refused to be crowned king was that he had no reason to abandon the Outland Expeditionary Force, become a coward and deserter, and return to live a comfortable life as a king. This reason instead aroused the enthusiasm of the people. Thus, the so-called Highland King's Party, who shouted for Donna's to be a hero, appeared. They were storm guardians who wandered all over Azeroth. In this Outland expedition, they gathered together, joined the expeditionary force, and shouted slogans. Fight for the true king of Stormguard. Wipe out the Outland. Let our king return to Torrential Fortress as the victor. The ideal was beautiful, but the reality was harsh. Even if the Storm Guardians had a high proportion of professionals, the absolute number was too small. After eliminating those who had obviously not undergone military training, only a little over 1,000 people were approved to join the Outland Expeditionary Force. Moreover, the composition of the professions was obviously unreasonable. There were many melee fighters, few ranged fighters, and a few priests, but not a single mage. This was normal. The Pharaoh was a profession that needed to burn money to support. The Storm Guardians, who lived a miserable life after the fall of their country, did not have the luxury to nurture their own mages. Even if they had the talent, they would sell themselves to the Dalajan and become a member of the Dalajan Mage Guild. Before the contract was completed, they could not return. Coincidentally, when Torrential Fortress was destroyed and the Storm Guardians had nowhere else to go, it was the current Princess Jaina of Kul Tiras who opened up Theramore and took in a large number of Storm Guardians and Lordaeron who had lost their homes. That was why they felt an almost blind affinity for Mark Dooku, who claimed to be Mage Kul Tiras. Mark, who was under Duque's control, did not disappoint them. Although he was not particularly strong, his skillful casting and accurate attacks effectively overturned several demon guards that were charging at him. He even used the Quagmire spell, which was rarely practiced by mages, to trap a hellhound with extremely high magic resistance. Everyone gathered a small team of spearmen and directly stabbed the hellhound to death in the Quagmire. Ha ha ha. As expected of a powerhouse who experienced the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Thomas laughed heartily. Mark. Forgive me for being presumptuous, but are you alone? If you don't have a team, can you team up with us? Even if it's a temporary one, we can discuss the conditions. If we have a mage in our team, we can get a higher level mission from the Alliance's military office. Because this concerns Stromguard's score. After the third battle at the Door of Darkness, Duke had popularized the system of grading and rewards according to the grade. Meritorious service will be rewarded, and mistakes will be punished. The Alliance is not a monopoly formed by a few large countries. Even if they are weak, people from other countries and independent organizations can still contribute to the cause of fighting against evil. These were Duque's original words. In order not to dampen the enthusiasm of other small countries and independent organizations, the Alliance would allocate an extra portion of the spoils of war from each battle to the organizations and individuals that performed well in the battle. Not only the spoils of war, but also the rewards from the Alliance itself. This was what the small countries valued the most. If the organizations or individuals from the various small countries worked together to obtain enough points, the Alliance could even tilt their policies and allocate manpower and resources to help them fulfill their dreams of revival. For example, an organization that had a certain amount of points proposed to revive a certain village in the Arthi Highlands. The Alliance would send someone to conduct an evaluation and give a score after the event. As long as someone was willing to give enough points to support this plan, once the points were met, the Alliance would send a large number of craftsmen to rebuild the village. Opening a path for mountains and building a bridge for rivers. The last group to receive special support from the alliance was the Wildhammer dwarves of the Eagle Nest Mountain. Because they had enough points, Duque directly used public funds to pay for the entire lightning tank division of the Iron Stove Fort and let them drive their tanks into the hinterlands. They used steam tanks and all kinds of modern machinery to create a new defense line that was more than 3 kilometers wide along the Varoan Lake in the middle of the hinterlands. With this line of defense, the scattered giant demons that had yet to be exterminated would not be able to sneak up on Eagle Nest Mountain. This made the territory controlled by the Wildhammer dwarves at least twice as large. That's right. This was the welfare policy of the alliance to support weak countries. While it greatly increased the cohesion of the countries and organizations in the alliance, it also raised the reputation of the alliance to another level. This time, Duque also clearly marked the price of Stromgard's revival, starting from 2 million points. As long as any organization or individual used various means to gather 2 million points and inject it into the Stromgard project, the alliance would fund the reconstruction of the broken Thoradin Wall and Sada Bridge, as well as the entire Rapid Storm City. The reconstruction of Rapid Storm City included the outer city walls, residential areas, and a palace that was not inferior to the Stormwind stronghold. If you wanted to raise the standard in this project, you could, but please give more points. From increasing the number of city walls, improving the quality of the city walls, to building train tracks from Rapid Storm City to South Shore, to turning the residential areas into villas, there was a wide variety of free choices. The people of Stromgard were overjoyed. They wanted to bet their whole race on the spot and earn 2 million points first. Unfortunately, dreams were beautiful, but reality was difficult. Even though the alliance had a clear price for points, such as a demon guard worth 10 points, it was still far from 2 million points. So they had to win over all the allies they could. Faced with Thomas's invitation, Duque smiled. I am a wandering mage, and I have also tasted the destruction of my country. Although Kul Tiras has been rebuilt, I will not forget the days when the people of Stromgard fought alongside me in Theramore. All right, I agree. Thank you very much. At this moment, in Karazhan, Jaina looked at Duque with a little surprise. Oh, my dear, what the hell are you trying to do? You painstakingly asked me to give you Kul Tira's identity card, just to help Stromgard restore its country? Duque smirked. Rapid Storm City has to be rebuilt no matter what. This concerns the face of the alliance. Haven't several countries been rebuilt before? Yes. The problem is that the queens of these countries have all followed me. Now I have to make it seem like the alliance is not my word. Chapter 1382. In a sense, the alliance was a group of people who were in the same boat. For a long time, as long as their capital had not fallen, they would not have the nerve to go out and say that they were alliance warriors. Yes, the Gilneas kingdom that built the Greymane Wall to block foreign enemies and cut off the alliance was regarded as a coward. The unkillable Stormwind relied on Duwe's amazing methods to perfectly restore the kingdom and jump to the top of the alliance. Queen Kalia of Lordaeron was promoted by Duque. Everyone knew that she became the queen because of Duque. For the same reason, she vowed not to marry. Okay, the same went for Kuel Salas, Alterac, and Kurtiras. Without exception, the Marcus family's Chamber of Commerce did their best to support the restoration of these declining kingdoms. They invested a lot of manpower and resources, rebuilt transportation, sold molded building materials at low prices, and even enjoyed interest-free loans if they had no money. The collateral was only a 30-year concession to certain minerals or specialties in these countries. It was because of this comprehensive support, including the economy, people's livelihood, and circulation, that these kingdoms could recover quickly. There was even a widely accepted saying, you want to restore the kingdom? First have a beautiful queen, then send her to Duke Marcus' harem. Then the country can be revived. When the alliance was in a power struggle, this method was the fastest and most effective. It could allow Duque to complete control of the alliance in the fastest and most peaceful way. When Duque completely controlled the alliance, this method seemed to be inappropriate. The reason why the alliance had such a thriving vitality in history where the capitals of the various countries were constantly in trouble and the world was repeatedly destroyed, was because of the tolerance that was born for the sake of a common goal. If the alliance only had the appearance of an alliance, it would actually be the empire's plaything. One day, the alliance would collapse, and that day might even come before the Burning Legion's attack. This required Duque's higher political wisdom to deal with this matter. No matter who he wanted to protect in private, he had to at least be fair on the surface. There were many countries in the alliance that had fallen. Now, there was Stromgard that could be saved. There was also the gnome kingdom Nomorigan that had been temporarily affected by radiation. In the near future, when the Drenii entered the alliance, there would be a half-destroyed Shotrath city. In this life, there was no such thing as Kale, that's forcing the Drenii to jump over the wall and flee by flying airships, but Shotrath city, which was located on the broken Draenor, was bound to fall sooner or later. At that time, rebuilding the capital would be another huge project. It was unknown if there were still Drenii living in Exodar, the capital of Azeroth. Jaina understood Duque's decision. However, as a strong woman who was good at making use of her feminine advantages, Jaina gently moved her mouth close to Duque's ear. She blew into his ear and rubbed her fingers against Duque's shoulder and collarbone. I understand. However, the core strength of Theramore was the people of Kultiras, plus the refugees from Stormguard and Lordaeron. Now that you're doing this, they're all gone. Then what's the point of my Theramore? That was what Jaina was trying to say. I remember that when I asked you to build Theramore, it was to build an alliance bridgehead in Kalandor, right? Have you forgotten what a bridgehead is? Jaina's movements suddenly froze. Damn it. Theramore was developing so well that she had almost forgotten about it. Unknowingly, Jaina had already built Theramore as the new capital of Kultiras. There was no other way. In the past 2,000 years, most of the enemies had come from the mainland, such as the trolls. Kultiras Island was isolated in the sea, more like a paradise. Unfortunately, on the eve of the Battle of Mount Hyjal, the Burning Legion swept through Kultiras, killing the late King Dailin, cruelly breaking the dreams of the people of Kultiras. In the beginning, Theramore had obtained so much manpower and material resources. Of course, it had the support of the alliance led by Duque. Another reason was that the life on the mainland had attracted a group of refugees who had lost their homes and longed for peace. Later, the alliance supported the Horde and obtained a large amount of ore from the Horde. As the only window-type port for trade between the alliance and the Horde, Theramore was simply plucking feathers from the geese. In order to reduce the shipping pressure, the alliance funded the establishment of a large-scale mineral refinery in Theramore, refining the ore into various metal ingots, and then shipping them back to Iron Furnace Castle, Stormwind City, Lordaeron City, and other places. On the other hand, in order to support the Battle of Silithus, several munitions factories specialized in manufacturing ammunition were built in Theramore in advance. Because of the trade between the Alliance and the Horde, as well as military needs, Theramore showed an exaggerated prosperity. Not to mention the people below, even Jaina, the master of Theramore, was numb. No one had thought that if one day the Alliance and the Horde fell out, what would happen to Theramore? Without Duque's reminder, Jaina would still not wake up. What about the bridgehead? She had to be prepared to be beaten up. Jaina's golden eyebrows almost stood up, and her beautiful face suddenly became fierce. Humph. The Horde has the ability to take down Theramore first, and besides, who dares? Theramore, as a city on an isolated island by the Dustwallow Swamp, had been built with the standards of the strongest military fortress from the beginning. The east was by the sea, and the north, west, and south were all swamps. The situation in the swamp was terrible. Most of the areas were swamps that could easily swallow people, and there were large numbers of large poisonous spiders, crocodiles, and other wild beasts. This was definitely not a good place to march. By the way, to the south of the Dustwallow Swamp was the nest of Duque's Mount, Onyxia, and there were thousands of Draconians wandering there. To enter Theramore City, they had to cross an extremely wide waterway. This waterway was a natural moat. With the cannons of the stronghold and a few flying warships, anyone who came would really die. It was definitely not wrong to say that it was easy to defend and hard to attack. Jaina was not bragging, but with the current strength of the Horde, even if they used the entire Horde's regular combat power, they would not be able to defeat Theramore. If they maintained their advantage on the sea and were not blocked, not to mention a year and a half, they could easily defend for 10 years. Duque smiled. Of course you're in an invincible position with conventional tactics. You're just afraid that the other side will use a super magic bomb or something. According to history, Theramore was destroyed by a nuclear-level magic bomb, focusing Rainbow, and Ronan was killed as well. Jaina, who had spent almost all of her youth on Theramore, turned white overnight because of this. Chapter 1383. Since Jaina was his harem, Duque certainly could not watch Theramore be destroyed and Jaina fall into a state of madness or decadence. Jaina wanted to refute, but she immediately shut up. Just like 10 years ago, no one could imagine that there would be warships and fortresses flying in the sky. No one could guarantee that in 10 years, there would not be a terrifying magic bomb that even a demigod could not defend against. Times were changing, and so was the situation. Theramore's prosperity benefited from the good relationship between the Horde and the Alliance, but what about the future? Jaina and Duque were immortals, but the chief of the Horde was not. Thrall was a wise leader, but what about his successor? Jaina would never forget the suffering she had when she was a young girl. For a moment, she almost thought that she was going to die in the icy Tirisful woodland at the hands of the cruel orcs. Every time he woke up in the middle of the night, he would think of those cruel and bloodthirsty green faces. Yes. That was the nature of the orcs. Unknowingly, she gritted her teeth until they creaked. Understood, I will move the civilian industries back to Kultiras. After all, the inscription on my crown is Queen Kultiras, not Queen Theramore. After venting her anger, Jaina's tone softened again. Hey, Duque, what did you say last time about the effective way to prevent large-scale bombing? Dig a hole. Dig a deep hole. Hide the most important things in the ground. I understand. Theramore was by the sea, so digging a hole was definitely a difficult task. However, Jaina's other title was the Ice Queen. After Duque became a demigod, as the only Breaking Dawn in the Alliance, and Kultiras was good at building ships and waterproofing, Jaina had ways to solve the problem of underground water seepage. Once it succeeded, even if it was destroyed by nuclear weapons, Theramore would still be like a nail nailed to the throat of the Horde territory by the hidden forces in the bunker. But now it seemed that it was not too late to change the plan. The Alliance and the Horde were still in the honeymoon period, and it would continue for a long time before the Draenor migration was completed. Jaina had plenty of time to adjust. Hey, Duque. Since Theramore can't be used as a commercial port, and the original Kultiras territory is too small, should I give my people another place to develop? Duque smiled bitterly. This pillow talk was amazing. With a wave of his hand, another map appeared in the air. Duque pointed at it and asked, "What do you think of this place?" Jaina's eyes widened. At first, she was delighted, but then she hesitated. It's good, but Duque had a sneer on his face. These guys have never done anything good. You don't learn your lesson after being beaten. Instead, you hold a grudge. Since they are destined not to join the Alliance, there is no need for them to exist. The Alliance will attack directly? Jaina was shocked. Of course not, we are a fair alliance. Looking at Duque's mischievous look, Jaina's face lit up with joy. Batty, no wonder I like you so much. Even though you broke off the engagement, she still threw herself at you. In September of the same year, something that was neither too big nor too small happened in the Alliance. In Stormwind's Stranglethorn Vale expeditionary force was cleaning up the remnants of the trolls in Zul Gurub who believed in the evil god Hacker. A troop of trolls led by a priest broke through the encirclement of the kingdom's army and rushed into the southern part of Stranglethorn Vale. The Alliance attempted to chase after them, but they received a warning from the goblins in Stranglethorn Vale's hidden treasure bay, who claimed that the southern part of Stranglethorn Vale was their territory. Who knew that the Zulf-Gurub trolls, who hated all non-hacker believers, would sweep through the entire southern part of Stranglethorn Vale in a short month? The Gurubashi Arena, Thin Fog Valley, and even Hidden Treasure Bay were all taken over by the red-eyed trolls. The defensive line that the goblins had painstakingly built was pierced through again and again like paper. The mercenaries recruited from all over the world were like ducks being chased around, caught and killed by the trolls one by one. In the end, the goblins could no longer hold on. Just like when the Alliance sent out a request for help, another wave of trolls still trapped in Zulf-Gurub began to rebel. Stormwind couldn't even take care of itself, and even the Stranglethorn Vale Expeditionary Force was almost caught in a pincer attack. Fortunately, the Alliance urgently transferred an air fleet and brought over the Marcus family's infantry regiment led by Windsor. Only then was the situation stabilized. In October of the 22nd year of the Dark Portal, the situation in the southern part of Stranglethorn Vale was already rotten beyond belief. Nearly 100,000 trolls had almost wiped out the goblins there. The Hot Sand Conglomerate, which controlled Hidden Treasure Bay, organized 2 large-scale landings in an attempt to recapture Stranglethorn Vale's territory, but both failed. As a last resort, the big boss of the Hot Sand Conglomerate, Goblin Baron Livigaz, once again asked for help from Stormwind and the Alliance. The regent of Stormwind, Bolvar, refused Livigaz's request on the grounds that the king was at war in the Outer Realm and that there were not enough troops, and told him to report to the Alliance. In the middle of the same month, Duque rejected the request of the Hot Sand Conglomerate, which had previously claimed to be neutral, on the grounds that the Alliance was sending more troops to the Outer Realm. At this point, the southern part of Stranglethorn Vale, together with the surrounding islands, was officially under the rule of the Zulf-Gurub Troll Empire. In the tribe, it was not that there was no one who saw the possible tricks, but no one could do anything about it. The war between the Alliance and the tribe in the Outer Realm was at its fiercest, and it was impossible for anyone to have the energy to take care of the trolls in Zulf-Gurub. But everyone could foresee that the trolls there were like grasshoppers after autumn, and they would not be able to jump around for long. Once the war in the Outer Realm ended, when Stormwind or the Alliance recovered, it would be the death of the trolls in Zulf-Gurub. After that, the territory in the southern part of Stranglethorn Vale would probably have nothing to do with the goblins. In Orgrimmar, Varrock Salufar, who stayed behind, asked Wajin in a deep voice, "Let's do nothing, okay? What can we do? The Thunder Spear trolls are not the Zulf-Gurub trolls. The Rustwater Conglomerate is not the Hot Sand Conglomerate." What Wajin said was also true. From ancient times to the present, the trolls had not been a unified race. The same was true for the goblins. There were 5 trading princes among the goblins, and only the weakest prince of the Rustwater Conglomerate, Gast Garavix, had joined the tribe. It was a different matter from the Hot Sand Conglomerate. If the tribe rashly intervened, maybe the Hot Sand Conglomerate would fight with the tribe first. Everyone could see that there was a huge hand behind this unusual event, and it was clearing all non-alliance forces out of the Eastern Kingdom. Perhaps in 3 or 5 years, the entire Eastern Kingdom would be a piece of iron. In fact, Wajin's guess was right. In Duque and Jaina's plan, when the Alliance and the Horde's Outer Realm Expeditionary Force returned to Azeroth, it would be the day when Zulf-Gurub and Stormwind cleaned up the trolls in the southern part of Stranglethorn Vale. When the trolls who believed in the evil god Hacker were killed, Zulf-Gurub would have a brand new main city in the southern part of Stranglethorn Vale. Chapter 1384. Duque had no qualms about swallowing the goblins' territory. In the game, he felt that the goblins were notorious and disgusting. In Booty Bay and other places controlled by the Hot Sand Conglomerate, if you accidentally touched the wrong mouse or used your magic staff to graze a goblin's skin, countless goblins would rush out from every corner to gang up on you. There was nowhere to run, and they would beat you to death with a stick. Therefore, some players did not hesitate to rely on the Bloodsail pirates just to gang up on the goblins. In this life, illusion became reality. The goblins used the name of neutrality to do dirty things, which was even more exaggerated. Not to mention the most ruthless venture capital companies among the goblins, they were a classic example of evil. They dared to trample on all human laws with only a 300% profit. But the goblins could make something with a 3% profit turn into a 300% profit. Similarly, they also trampled on all laws. The milk seller mixed water into the milk, but these bastards mixed lime into the water. It was fine as long as it looked white. It did not matter if you died or not, as long as you got the money. Later, after the Alliance did business with the goblins, they strengthened the inspection, regardless of the method or frequency. Duque also specially added probability to prevent Alliance merchants and official procurement personnel from being fooled. The result was good. For example, in order to strengthen the physical fitness of the next generation of Stormwind citizens, Duque proposed the slogan, "A cup of milk a day makes Stormwind strong." Did you know how the goblins fooled Stormwind City? Stormwind City had a lot of inspection methods, right? The goblins mixed cow urine into the milk. Anyway, whether it was steamed or dried, it was still cow components, right? They would give you, "A cup of urine a day makes a weak Stormwind person." Anyway, every time something was exposed, the goblins would push the person directly to the forefront. It was up to the goblins to kill them. Later on, there would be a second or even an infinite number of fellows who wanted to do business with the Alliance, especially the Marcus family in Stormwind. Because everyone knew that the Marcus family was rich. In the early years, the goblins organized various theft gangs to blow up Duque's family's treasury. After many failures, the theft turned into fraud. In any case, every time it was exposed, the goblins would immediately disassociate themselves and claim that it was done by their subordinates. They were absolutely neutral. Only a goblin who successfully swindles money from the Marcus family is an outstanding goblin. This kind of crazy and twisted values had become more and more intense during the period when Alicia was in charge of the Marcus family's finances. The goblins were like moths flying into a flame. Wave after wave of swindlers appeared, attempting to swindle the goblins and become famous among the goblins. It was only after Duque returned from the War of the Ancients and cut off all trade with the gnomes that they started to restrain themselves. The Alliance's cold treatment of the various groups of goblins was also an important reason for forcing the Rustwater conglomerate to lean towards the Horde. The Rusty Water conglomerate joined the tribe 10 years earlier than the original history. Although the tribe had obtained a lot of goblin technology, the consequences of introducing these cancerous tumors was really ha. So this time, the Alliance borrowed the hands of the trolls to clear the goblin forces in the entire Stranglethorn Vale. From the Venture Capital Company camp in the middle of Stranglethorn Vale to Hidden Treasure Bay, one of the pillars of the hot sand conglomerate, Duque really had no psychological burden. When the Outland expedition was over, Duque would gradually reduce the living space of the goblins step by step. Perhaps one day, there would be no more goblins in the entire Azeroth, and the world would really be much more peaceful. Duque opened up the magic network while controlling the war in Stranglethorn Vale. At the same time, he also remotely controlled Mark Dooku, who was in the Outland. Out of bad taste, the name he used 10,000 years ago was attached to this doppelganger. Due to perfect control, this Mark also showed impeccable human habits. He needed to breathe, eat, drink, and defecate. Occasionally, he would make mistakes when casting magic due to the scattered elements in the Outland. No one doubted that this high-end wizard who had fought side by side with them for so long was actually a puppet-like imitation. William and Thrall had a good time working together. From the middle of Hellfire Peninsula to the Dark Portal in the east, there was a path of glory. This was the path that the old Horde had taken when they gathered here and prepared to cross through space to attack Azeroth. Of course, looking at this path now, it was a little ironic. This was because the target that the old Horde had tried to conquer was now fighting back with the new Horde. Although it was to liberate the beast men who were threatened by the Burning Legion, it still felt strange. In order to make each other feel at ease, on that day, after taking care of the demon army that had obstructed the Alliance army from entering the Outland, the Alliance and the Horde used the path of glory that traversed through Hellfire Peninsula as the dividing line. The south was controlled by the Alliance. With Fort Glory and the Vanguard camp at the Dark Portal as the core, a series of sentries and bunkers were built to form a line of defense and ensure the supply line. The north was handed over to the Horde. With the support of the Alliance's resources, the Horde only took 2 months to build a medium-sized fortress, Salma. From October onwards, the Alliance and the Horde split up and attacked Hellfire Fortress together. There were differences in the distribution of specific tasks. The Horde mainly dealt with the fell beast men. They used as many non-lethal methods as possible, such as throwing nets and the tear-inducing aura provided by the Alliance, to capture their demonic brethren and imprison them and send them to the rear. The reason why these fell beast men were so violent was because of the blood of the Lord of the Abyss. Magtheridon couldn't compare to his boss, Manaroth, but if the dosage was large, it would still be quite troublesome. Almost every day, close to 1,000 fell beast men would be sent through the dark portal to the Warhammer camp in the northwest of the Blasted Lands. There, they would be treated by the Horde shaman's natural magic. After a certain amount of poison and demonic power was expelled from their bodies, they would be given Stratholme holy water and other methods to quickly get rid of the demonic blood in their bodies. Under the leadership of William, the Alliance broke through the walls of Hellfire Fortress and turned to attack Magtheridon's lair. On the 16th of October, Thomas suddenly received a notification from the mission announcer of Fort Glory, asking his team to head to Fort Glory to meet Danath Trollbane. Thomas was overjoyed. Although the people of Stormguard had always wanted to meet this legendary next king, Danath always did things according to the rules. They could meet for official matters of the Alliance, but they couldn't meet for private matters. Now that they finally had the chance to show their faces in front of the future king, Thomas and the others were rather excited. With Thomas and Duque in the lead, a few core members of the Highland Warrior Group arrived at Fort Glory under the guidance of the guards. It had been a long time since Duque saw the 5 heroes of the Expeditionary Army, who were supposed to have statues erected in Stormwind City. Ugh! He suddenly felt that his eternal youth was too much of a cheat. The handsome Danath Trollbane from the second battle at the Dark Portal had now become a bald, white-haired old man. Chapter 1385. During the first years of the Dark Portal, even though Danath had the great surname of Trollbane, Salas did not show any favoritism. Salas, on the other hand, didn't show any favoritism. He made Danath start as a member of the militia. If not for the soul-stirring battle of the Dark Portal, perhaps Danath would have been like the collateral descendants of the large families, vanishing into the masses. After surviving the Second World War of the Dark Portal, guarding the Watchtower and the Cursed Lands, coming to the Outland and becoming the manager of the Glory Stronghold, Danath used his conscientious character to prove his reliability to the world. In terms of strength, Danath definitely could not compare to those fierce men of the same era. Whether it was in the original history or in this life, he did not have any outstanding records of fighting a strong enemy. Not everyone could become the hero that was the center of attention. Many times, a general who could guard a region was far rarer than a fierce general who could charge into battle and seize the flag. Danath was obviously this kind of general. Steady and reliable. Seeing him like this, Duque sighed. The once young commander who did not know the taste of worry. Now, under the ravages of time, if someone told Duque that Danath was 60 years old, Duque would probably believe it. Danath had a typical Mediterranean hairstyle, with snow-white sideburns, a typical full beard, and a face full of wrinkles. All 10 of his fingernails were black. If he wasn't dressed in military attire and had a pair of sharp, sword-like eyebrows, he would look like a typical old farmer. He had just turned 40 years old this year. Duque wondered if he should give him a quota of eternal life. Ever since Duque sold his Mount Onyxia to the Void battlefield, Alexstrasza had already obtained 50 quotas from Nozdormu for him. She also promised that as long as he asked, she would definitely give him enough. But even though Duque had received great benefits from these mortals, he would not casually give them away. Anything, once overflowing, would lose its value. Until now, Duque had only given Windsor and Big Van Cleef Danath. After he returned from the Outland, he would give him another as a gift. Danath glanced at Thomas, then at Duque. He was stunned for a moment, but he quickly turned his gaze back to Thomas. Duque, who was in Karazhan, laughed out loud. Donna's had such a reaction because before Duque had returned to participate in the Battle of the Ancients, he had put on a lot of makeup, almost to the point of plastic surgery. Apart from the black hair and black eyes, he looked like a completely different person. Many things could be changed, but a person's temperament was the hardest to erase. They were both wizards, and Donna's easily thought of Duque from more than a decade ago. Back then, Duque was also at the weak morning star realm, and had a pair of deep eyes that were filled with wisdom. Of course, today's focus was on Thomas. Donna stood with his hands behind his back and focused on Thomas. Ever since we entered the Outland, the Highland Warriors Group's results have been pretty good. 132 missions, with a completion rate of 95%. The mission release team gave you a rating of legend, because even if you failed the missions, you faced powerful demons that required an entire army or a hero to deal with. To tell you the truth, I am very satisfied. Thank you for your compliment, Trollbane. Marshal. Thomas actually wanted to call Donna's Your Majesty, but he was stuck. In the end, he still called him by his military rank. The position of Marshal was given to Donna's by order of Duque after communications with the Outland had been restored. Before the third battle of the Dark Portal, because of the chaos caused by Tarina's and the other countries, military ranks were generally too high, and there were more marshals. After being promoted, they could not be demoted, so most of the time, marshals did what generals did in the Second World War. Basically, the generals who could take charge of an area were all marshals. Donna's was an upright soldier, and was used to the excitement of his comrades. Thomas had not said anything wrong, and he had no intention of pursuing the matter. All right, gentlemen, the Alliance would like to entrust you with a mission that is not mandatory. Because the danger level is quite high, there are no mandatory requirements for the results. This is an elite mission, and the difficulty is high, so the points and rewards will be doubled. How many points and rewards you get will depend on your results. Thomas was excited, and immediately stood at attention. We will do our best to complete the mission. Don't agree too early. The Alliance needs a small to medium-sized team that's strong and smart enough to open up the connection between Glory Castle and Shotrath City that was once severed. Also, they need to collect the topographic map along the way. This isn't an easy task. Donna smiled, his weather-beaten face had deep wrinkles. He was no longer young, but he envied the drive of those young people. Thomas had just turned 28, and was at the best age for a man. He was strong and had a lot of battle experience. As an old soldier who had experienced many wars, Donna's boasted that he could see through 99% of people, but he found that he could not see through this Mark Dooku. In his 20 years in the army, Donna's had seen all kinds of mages. Most of them were from the Dalajan and Stormwind City's Royal Magic Academy. Those little fellows were like flowers in a greenhouse, and needed a long time to adapt before they could become qualified battle mages. But Mark was different. In his eyes, there was no fear of the unknown, nor was he the kind of young man who had just entered the battlefield, fearless because of ignorance. His wise eyes seemed to be able to see through all the fog in the world. This was a calmness and magnanimity that did not match his age. According to the information, this mage Kultiras should have been unorthodox and not suitable for such an important mission. Donna's noticed that this Mark Dooku's identity was actually from Kultiras' court. Donna's thought to himself, maybe he's a disciple of some court mage who came out to train. Suddenly, Donna's confidence in this mission increased. You also know that the Alliance commander, His Excellency Duke Marcus, has become a demigod of the weave, right? Thomas and Duque nodded at the same time. Donna's nodded to a white-bearded old mage beside him. The old mage said, more than 20 years ago, the Alliance still relied on people riding griffins. Most of the time, they could only send messages on horseback. But today, the Alliance can no longer do without magic. The Outland is a place where magical elements are quite unstable. Since the second battle of the Dark Portal, the Alliance has been using magic to send messages. It seems very bad here. Sometimes we can guarantee continuous communication for a few hours, and sometimes we can't contact the outpost 3 miles away for a few weeks. Chapter 1386. The first thing you need to do is to go southwest from Glory Castle and enter the Thorn Path. Set up a magic communication relay device every 5,000 yards. With them, we can guarantee communication in 99% of cases. Make sure they are in a safe place and not destroyed by monsters. Also, mark them well. Your basic mission is completed. After saying that, the old mage bowed to show that he was done. Donna spoke again. Next is the follow-up mission for the advancement. For every additional part completed, there will be double or even triple the points and rewards. The details are written in the report. First, if possible, try to reach Shotrath City. The Alliance urgently needs information on Shotrath City. Finally, if possible, try to escort at least one emissary from Shotrath City back. The mission was clear and the direction was clear. There was nothing much to say. Since entering the Outland, Thomas and the other Highland Knights had mostly taken on missions to clear the monsters around Glory Castle. They were very familiar with the terrain and the way to fight monsters. And this time, there was a big bug mount that was completely different from the Alliance. Although it affected the appearance of the city, it had to be said that the Kiraji bug mount was really useful. It had a high IQ and could basically understand the master's thoughts under the control crystal. Not afraid of death, able to fight, even if the bug was thrown to cover the rear, it wouldn't complain. It could climb mountains and wade rivers, and it wasn't picky with food. It could eat dead monsters, rotten meat, rotten wood, and even its dead companions could become food. Basically, other than being ugly, it was all good points. Everyone was quite disgusted with the Alliance letting go of those bugmen who had killed so many of their compatriots. As the war went on, everyone accepted these strong bugs. The Horde had the battle wolves, the Alliance had the bugs. It sounded a notch lower, but it felt more useful than the battle wolves. Moral integrity was not as valuable as life. No taste, no moral integrity, or life was more important. As long as one was in the middle or lower ranks, they would choose it. And the bug mount could be replenished endlessly. Delicate things like battle horses were not so easy to replenish. The mission was decided. At this moment, in the bedroom on the top floor of Karazhan, Jaina reclined on the chaise longue, elegantly sipping a mouthful of black tea. Then, she put down the exquisite white porcelain cup and quietly watched the internet addict demigod play games. Of course, she didn't know that Dumuk's dream before he transmigrated was to have his own game room with a big screen and top-notch equipment. Even playing Minesweeper with a 4-way Titan graphics card was a decadent and depraved game. On the contrary, Jaina felt that Duque, who was working hard, was very charming. Due to the damage to his Azeroth astral soul, he had no choice but to stay behind. He had no way to conduct the frontline command that he loved the most, and he had no way to personally participate in the great adventure against the evil enemies. Yet, he was still able to find joy in this kind of situation, using his imagination to find a new solution. Sure enough, only a man like this was qualified to possess her in such a domineering manner. He even made her accept the fact that she was just a part of his harem without any complaints or regrets. Hey, Duque, are you really not going to consider directly intervening in the affairs of the Outlands? Jaina asked as she rested her chin on her hand. Duque shook his head. Now that I think about it, even if I didn't want to stay here, I shouldn't have gone to the Outer Realms. Now, Kil'jaeden and I can be considered to be trading pieces. Duel. Indeed, if Duque did not go to the Outer Realms, he would be able to avoid the trap set by the Burning Legion in the Outer Realms. Duque did not move, and Elun was also there, so they would be restraining Kil'jaeden. However, Duque used a remote control method to solve the problem of him not being able to directly participate in the battle. If it was any other powerhouse, they would most likely not be able to affect the overall situation because they had switched to a clone. Duque was a weirdo. As a transmigrator, he had used his intelligence to kill countless strong enemies. He believed that this time would not be an exception. Anyway, even if he really lost, it would only be a clone, and he could make it in half a day. Although I don't have unlimited revivals this time, I will play the clone war with you. Let's see if you're afraid. The next day, Thomas and the rest were ready. The Highland warriors had 38 people, a total of 120 insect mounts. It could be said that one person rode 3 mounts. They majestically set off from the south gate of Honor Castle, taking a detour to the thorny path. After leaving Honor Castle, Duque looked at the sky and secretly sighed. "What's wrong?" Thomas asked. "Nothing, it's just that I can't get used to this kind of world." "Indeed. No matter how many times I see it, I won't get used to it. This sky that was close to eternal night. There was no sun, no clouds, there was only blurred and illusory darkness. From time to time, an unknown bolt of lightning would flash through the sky, piercing through the boulders that were spinning in the sky. The gravity was obviously normal, but there were boulders floating in the sky. There was no sunlight, but the closer they got to the scarlet dry ground, the brighter it became. This kind of unscientific scenery felt strange no matter how one looked at it. From the reddish-brown hill where Honor Castle was located, if one followed the slope down, they would be surrounded by enemies. Anything that did not have an alliance insignia would attack you. Gulp, a sound that the recruits could not understand sounded from afar. Thomas and the rest immediately frowned. Immediately, a violent cloud of dust rose from afar. Hellboar, a dark elf scout, had long since shouted from the left wing. Hellboar, a typical wild beast that had mutated due to the overflow of demonic blood. It had the extremely strengthened body of a demonic creature, as well as the instinctive ferocity of a wild beast. This thing roamed the entire Hellfire Peninsula. Almost every week, the Alliance would specially organize a hunt for it. Unfortunately, it could only reduce its numbers, but it was unable to completely eradicate this terrifying species. The Hellboar itself was not very strong in close combat. What was scary was its charge. Under a full charge, the Hellboar's tusks had once destroyed a new model tank. This wasn't an old-fashioned steam tank, but the Alliance's latest diesel tank. In the outer lands, because of the unstable air pressure, the steam engine's starting condition was quite bad. The Alliance had no choice but to send the latest diesel tank to test it. Although diesel also had all sorts of problems, at least it could be used, and it had more horsepower. The dwarves had installed an even more insane 130mm steel plate on the side of the tank. Even so, it had been directly pierced through, instantly destroying the engine and ammunition compartment, as well as losing 3 elite dwarf tank soldiers. Seeing this berserk Hellboar charge over, Thomas frowned on the spot. If hit by that big thing, at least 2 or 3 bug mounts would be destroyed. Although the bugs were not bad in close combat, their relatively thin legs had always been their weakness. Bug mounts had no way of dealing with the charge. "I'll do it," Duque said softly. Lightly, a hole as thick as an arm appeared under the Hellboar's front hooves. The Hellboar's charge became the biggest killer. The instant its left front leg sank into the ground, its charge and weight directly tore off its entire leg. Chapter 1387. The Dry Land, the Howling Wind. The atmosphere was scorching hot, devoid of any signs of life. What did not match the atmosphere was the team's atmosphere. "Wow! Ha ha ha!" The team members all screamed and jumped in joy. If it was any other team, the most common method would be to send a strong professional, preferably a defensive warrior, to take the Hellboar's charge head-on, then drag it into a battle of attrition, slowly whittling down this thick-skinned demon boar. There was no other way. Creatures that had been demonized were generally very strong. But now, there was a newbie rider, a big shot, personally controlled by Duque, Mark Dooku. That was to turn something rotten into something magical. Unless it was an undead creature, no one would be able to endure tearing off a leg while sprinting at high speed. The Hellboar, which only had 3 legs left, screamed in pain. It struggled madly, venting the rage in its heart, trying to use its hooves and horns to kill any creature that approached it. If this was a mission issued by Honor Castle, they would probably have to fight a fierce battle to take care of this thing, but they had a more important mission. "Mantis shrimp, let's go." Duque patted the red bug mount he was riding. The insect let out a low hum, then moved its 4 sharp and long legs, and ran away. Ha 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 ha. Awesome. Thomas and the others laughed and followed. The Hellfire Peninsula was a hellish place, a world where the strong preyed on the weak. If they left this 3-legged boar that weighed more than 2 tons here, it would not live for long. Moreover, this place was not far from Honor Castle. The guards on the guard tower had already seen this scene. Just because Duque and the others did not accept the mission didn't mean that others did not. As a matter of fact, there were already other teams eagerly rushing out to take advantage of the situation. Thomas and Duque did not care. The group of people swaggered off. The bug mount was very fast, over 40 kilometers per hour. But because of the strange curvature of the bug's legs and multi-joint shock absorption, it was not as bumpy as a horse. Not long after, the towering Honor Castle behind them disappeared into the horizon. A day later, the outermost guard tower in the southwest of Honor Castle was also left behind. The team had completely left Glory Castle's territory. Yeah, Thomas used a very standard charging movement while holding a lance that was over 5 meters long in his hands. The sharp spear had accurately pierced through the head of a steel-toothed marauder while moving at high speed, and the rather tough head of the marauder directly exploded like a rotten watermelon. Purple blood splattered in all directions. At the same time, the center of the spear that was supposed to slow down the momentum of the knight and the lance exploded. Let's go. Thomas did not stop and called for everyone to continue the assault. This insect also had a 4-legged pedestal-like base. Its lower body was very similar to the Karaji insect people, but its Magata-like upper body was abnormally ugly. However, its mouth full of buck teeth was not just for decoration. Duque had personally seen an Alliance knight get his upper body bitten off less than 20 meters in front of him. Please note that the entire upper body was bitten off together with the 5 mm thick plate armor. From another aspect, this reflected that Thomas's shot was quite exquisite. For a giant insect with high speed and agility, he could still change the direction of the spearhead while charging at high speed along with the head of the steel-toothed marauder. This skill was like stabbing a matchbox with the spearhead at 60 kilometers per hour. It was amazing. Should it be said that he was worthy of the title of Highland Knight? Along the way, there were no hordes of monsters, but there were still all kinds of losses. 3 Karaji insect mounts had their legs broken. Because they had just set out, their supplies were still quite full. They could only move the most important supplies, abandon the excess goods, and let the 2 insects fend for themselves. 2 cavalrymen from Lordaeron were ambushed by a void demon. Half of their bodies were swallowed, and there was no need to pull them out. Only half of them were left on the spot. Duque used a round of arcane missiles to finish off the void demon, which could be considered revenge. After spending 3 days, the team arrived at the thorny path. Looking at the scene, almost everyone frowned. Isn't this too dangerous? Thorns were thorns, yes, but the roots were huge thorny plants that needed 2 people to wrap their arms around. It was a nightmare. The only path was an arched passageway in the thorns that could accommodate 2 carriages side by side. This was the so-called path. In theory, this could lead to the Taraka forest, but no one knew what was in this path, or if the path would become smaller and smaller after entering. In the end, they were tragically stuck inside, unable to advance or retreat. Thomas used his spare knight's spear to poke at the thorns, and found that the spear was not sharp enough. If a person were to collide with it, gulp. Everyone could not help but swallow their saliva. Findlay, can you do anything? Thomas called out to a night elf. As a member of the Cenarian Expeditionary Force, Findlay's swift spear was specially transferred here for this mission. This elite druid looked at it, carefully sensed it, and shook his head. No. The land here is full of corrosion and decay, my power is not enough to affect the land here. Not to mention these thorns that have been here for at least 1,000 years. Thomas looked at Duque again, and Duque also shook his head. These hardened thorns were quite resistant to fire even if they were dead. If Duque's main body was here, he would have flattened it. Finally, he looked at the sky, and soon Thomas gave up. There were still many flying beasts wandering in the sky. They circled back and forth, gauging each other's strength. From time to time, a raptor would suddenly attack another, and then feathers, blood, and even organs would fall from the sky. The prize for the winner was the corpse of the loser. The Alliance tried to send a team of griffins over, but only one griffin knight returned alive, and he died not long after. Let's go in. I'll go first. Shaking his head, Thomas took the lead and rode the worm into the thorny path. The dense thorns quickly blocked out all external light. Even with a torch in hand, they still had the vague feeling that they would die the next moment, and be impaled on the thorns. This was a path that no one had used for at least 10 years. If not for the fact that most of the thorns had died due to the decay of the land, such a path would have long been covered by plants. Even so, the team was still extremely careful. The only fortunate thing was that Duque gave way to a dozen fireballs. The team formed a long snake formation around them, allowing the light to be slightly better. At this moment, Thomas, who was at the front, suddenly heard a scream coming from a place further ahead. Someone was attacked. Chapter 1388. There were people in front of the thorny path. Thomas's first reaction was that it was impossible. Before he left, he had already confirmed that his team was the only one sent by Honor Castle. Now, the main force of the Alliance was besieging Hellfire Citadel under the leadership of King Varian, and no matter how far the Alliance scouts went, they could not pass through Zangermarsh, which was further west of Hellfire Peninsula. Now, the entrance to the swamp was filled with a thick poisonous fog. Before the Cenarian Expeditionary Army's druids purified the fog, no one could pass through. Could it be Drenii? Duque finished Thomas's words. Perhaps this was the only explanation. The situation in the Outland was quite chaotic, and the major forces were intertwined with each other. Kale, that must have sat on his private phoenix and brought his underlings along the way, flying to the northernmost stronghold of the storm to help the Drenii guard their home. In the southern Taroka forest, he threw a team of his own there, and they directly became Shotrath City's astrologer. That was it. Although the Drenii would not be completely wiped out, what could they do with such a scattered force? In the center of the Outland were the two pits of Hellfire Citadel and Zangermarsh, which blocked the way. What made the Alliance angry the most was that Thrall did not control his subordinates, or rather, those guys had been harboring evil intentions for a long time. Kargath Bladefist, this guy who died in the dark portal of Azeroth in this life and was resurrected by Sun King as a forgotten warrior hero, actually rebelled and announced that he would accept the power of the Burning Legion as an undead. He also regained control of the Shattered Palm clan and ran to the Shattered Hall of Hellfire Citadel to become the boss. Thrall was exasperated and turned to attack the Shattered Hall. Other than Kargath, there was also the chieftain of the Blood Ring clan, Kilrog Deadeye, and the chieftain of the Bone Gnawing clan, Harkin Cranium Splitter. In this life, they were killed in the Dark Portal and were also resurrected by Sun King. Like Kargath, they had also served Zul under Kill, Jaden's control. After being resurrected, they did nothing until they returned to the Outland. Only then did they reveal their ferocious fangs and raise the flag of rebellion. Unlike Kargath, Kilrog and Harkan were nowhere to be found. Duque suddenly had a feeling that the situation in front was related to these two chieftains who had run off. Charge! Thomas jumped down from the Zerg and raised his, excellent, shield up high. He drew his one-handed sword and rushed to the front. Then, with the illumination spell that Duque cast on his shield, he managed to distinguish the things in front of him and moved as fast as he could. Don't come over. Don't come any closer. A sobbing voice came from ahead. It was a female Drenii. Thomas and the others didn't understand, but Duque heard everything clearly with the help of the translation software. That's right. It's a Drenii. Duque's words made Thomas advance even faster. Thomas carefully placed the upper part of the large kite shield on his visor, revealing only half of his helmet. Using the gap in his helmet, he tried his best to look into the distance. He was close. He was close. It was getting closer and closer. Thomas brought Duque, Findlay, and a few other experts and rushed over first. After running for about 3 minutes, they saw their target. How should I put it? The current situation was rather comical. There were 2 huge and twisted vines, and in the narrow gap between the 2 vines, a blue-skinned dreamy-eyed girl squeezed herself in. She seemed to have used a hammer to smash the small thorns in the middle of the vines so that she wouldn't get hurt and could hide from the pursuit of the 2 steel-toothed raiders. However, even though the 2 frenzied raiders couldn't squeeze into the narrow gap between the vines, they still used everything they had to attack the dreamy-eyed girl. Their sharp claws kept going in and out, scratching the inside. The gap wasn't very deep. Even if the girl squeezed in with all her might, she still couldn't avoid the sharp claws that reached the end. Her butt happened to be facing outwards. Because of their body shape, the dreamy-eyes butt was more perky. As a result, the girl's butt suffered and was scratched by the sharp claws again and again. The fresh blood stimulated these mutated monsters, and they seemed to become even more violent. Duque was the first to make a move, using the old trick of calm and mind plus flame blast. No matter when it was used, it was always high-end and classy. The sudden burst of light frightened the 2 steel-toothed darters. The one in front tried to dodge to the right, but in its haste, it was pierced by a large thorn spike. In the next moment, it turned into a barbecued meat skewer. Of course, no one would want to eat the barbecue meat of the steel-toothed raiders. Originally, the other raider wanted to run, but Findlay directly smashed Starfire on the raider's head, which instead aroused the ferocity of the beast. It let out a sharp cry and rushed over recklessly, just in time to meet Thomas's charge. Bang! With a loud noise, Thomas directly slammed its whole body into a thorn, and a dozen sharp thorns pierced its body from behind. Even so, it was still fine. It twisted its body frantically, trying to use its claws to kill Thomas and drag him down with it. How could Thomas, who was already prepared, give it this chance? Almost at the moment when charge hit the target, he immediately activated counterattack windstorm. The raiders' fierce attacks, which were as dense as raindrops, were all withstood by the thick fine shield. With the support of the warrior profession's unique fury, Thomas made an attack that exceeded the limits of his normal body. The long sharp sword seemed to turn into a dagger, quickly and ruthlessly stabbing into the raider's abdomen. 1 slash, 2 slashes, 3 slashes, a total of 20 slashes, almost turning the raider's entire abdomen into minced meat. The 2 beasts died, and the atmosphere immediately eased. Looking at the human standing outside, the dreamy-eyed girl was still in a state of shock. "It's okay. Please don't be afraid. We are Alliance soldiers invited by your leader, Willen, to Shotrath City." Duque opened his mouth and spoke in the extremely pure Dreeny-eye language. This made Thomas and the others quite envious. There was clearly more than one hero who saved the damsel in distress, so why was Mark Dooku the only one to claim credit? Helplessly, other than him, no one else knew Dreeny-eye language. "You are humans?" Unexpectedly, the Dreeny-eye girl actually knew human common language with a thick accent. It was a little awkward, but they could still understand it. Everyone, including Duque, immediately realized they had picked up a treasure. "Yes. We are humans." "That's right, who taught you the common language?" "Those blood elves." "Astrologer?" "Oh. Yes, Lord Willen instructed me that in order to better communicate with the human-led alliance, it would be best for me to learn the common language. These days, I have been studying very hard, and it seems like it has come in handy." As the Dreeny-eye girl spoke, she bared her teeth and crawled out from the gaps of the vines. Chapter 1389. On the surface, she was covered in blood and was in bad shape. Duque could tell at a glance that the girl was very lucky. They were all superficial wounds that could be healed with a healing spell. Unexpectedly, just as Duque was about to call for a priest, the girl actually started healing herself with holy light. Oh, and a priest? Taking advantage of this moment, Duque sized up the Drenii girl. The girl had a figure similar to that of a human female, slim and slender. If it wasn't for the faint lines of her biceps on her arms, one would probably think she was a young lady just by looking at her silhouette. Her light blue skin glowed with holy light, and the girl was bathed in a holy aura. Although in Duque's eyes, this level of holy light was still very shallow. She had two S-shaped curved goat horns on her head, and below her knees were recurved hooves that were a little unthinkable for humans. For balance, the girl's body also seemed to have become curvy in both the front and the back. There was no gorgeous clothing. The Drenii girl was dressed like a typical commoner girl. The white linen top only covered her well-developed outland peaks. It seemed to be a typical off-the-shoulder outfit for ease of movement. The top that went from below her ribs to her neck made her neck look even more slender. A pair of leather pants that should have been brown had now turned dark red due to the blood staining them. She carried what in theory was a short warhammer in her hand, but in Duque's eyes, it was just a wooden stick in a metal lump. Duque noticed that there was no blood on the head of the warhammer. There wasn't even any blood left behind. A rookie on the battlefield for the first time? Duque really didn't know why Weiluan would send such a rookie to die. In the chaotic outland, it was enough for her to die 100 times. But no matter how he looked at it, this guy's luck was EX+. If she had the ability to come to the thorny path alone, she actually ran into the once-in-a-century Alliance advance team. Excuse me, can you please turn around? I. The Drenii girl's face was red. While Thomas was still in a daze, Duque had already come to a realization. She felt that her buttocks had been pierced by the flying man's sharp leg. Now that she was going to heal herself, it was really indecent to be injured there. Duque thought for a moment. Seeing that this guy wouldn't have a high-end item like a storage space bag, he directly handed over a piece of canvas. Thank you. The girl's face turned even redder, like a freshly steamed prawn, and she quickly took the canvas. A few minutes later, Thomas met up with the rest of the army, and the Drenii girl's wound was also healed. Seeing the large canvas patch on the girl's butt, Thomas, the silly goose, suddenly came to a realization. The girl was quite clever with her hands, because Duque also saw a hole above her butt. The edge of the hole was even smoothed out, so that the Drenii's nearly half-a-meter-long blue tail could be seen. What a nimble tail. It wagged and wagged, bending left and right. Duque couldn't help but think of when he was taming dragons. Sometimes, he would get Onyxia in human form to give him a red tail that was proportional to a human's body for him to rub. Every time he saw the strange dizziness on the black dragon princess' face and heard her moans, Duque would feel very satisfied. This was like stroking a cat, addictive. Suddenly, the Drenii girl screamed, attracting everyone's attention. Only then did Duque realize that his hand was cheap. He actually reached out to grab her tail and rub it. Sorry, I was too curious. Is this the first time you've seen a Drenii? Yes. Duque lowered his head. My companion didn't mean to offend you. We're actually all very curious, Thomas hurriedly explained. No. It's okay, it's not your fault. But please don't touch a Drenii's tail so casually in the future. They usually get angry, especially males. The girl lowered her head. Then, the girl took a deep breath and raised her head. There was a look of self-encouragement on her face. Even though there was still fear in her eyes, she tried her best to encourage herself and clenched her small fists. Please forgive me for being flustered, I've never killed anyone before, large creatures. My name is Imriel, and I'm Karabayer's apprentice. Are you the vanguard sent by the Alliance? Looks like the holy light is really on my side today. Then I'm willing to go with you. Let's go to a safe place first. Hearing this signature introduction, Duque and Karazhan, who knew how many light years away, felt as if he was struck by lightning. There was only one voice in his mind, what the heck? It's actually hooves. How is this possible? As for having the same name, that was impossible. Among the Drenii, their mother of holy light would never give them the same name. In Duque's mind, there were 100,000 rhinoceroses galloping. It was as if every rhinoceros was grunting in a strange voice, F***ck your lungs. F***ck your kidneys. If all the major events that Duque had experienced before basically overlapped with the historical events in his mind, then it would match up. Then now, this matter was definitely a mess. According to the original history, this Drenii girl Imriel, who was affectionately called Hooves by countless players, would only appear in the 6th version of World of Warcraft, King of Draenor. Normally, that would be at least 30 years after the Dark Portal. Why would she appear at this time? No. The Drenii's lifespan was already extremely long. Didn't you see that the 3 leaders of Eridar from 25,000 years ago were still alive and kicking? Didn't you see that even after 10,000 years, the Eridar twins were still as beautiful as flowers? If Imriel lived for 8 to 10 years, it would be equivalent to 2 to 3 days for humans. Regarding this deviation in history, Duque was convinced. I'm Thomas Faddock, a warrior, the captain of the advance party that the Alliance sent to Shotrath City. I'm Mark Dooku, a mage, the vice-captain of the advance party. After a round of self-introductions, everyone finally knew. At this time, Shotrath City was being attacked again. The one leading the army was actually Kilrog Deadeye, who had just defected from the Horde and ran over to Illidan's camp. Shotrath City had never really been restored, even with the addition of some blood elves, who were the current astrologers. Shotrath City was still in a precarious situation. Willan, that quack, claimed to have seen the future. He had a premonition that there would be an alliance team heading towards Shotrath City from here to seek contact. So, even though he was in a state of shortage of troops, he still sent a team of 20 people to provide support. However, not every Drenii who received the protection of the Holy Light would be immortal. It was not easy for them to get out of the secret path. Before the group of 20 could even walk out of the Terakar forest, they were attacked by their former comrades, who were now the Broken, to the north of Turum, the former Drenii settlement. Chapter 1390. The Broken were once a race of Drenii who were influenced by the power of the Burning Legion. Many of them had lost their rationality and ego due to various circumstances, or changed their appearance and temperament. The current batch of breakers were the brainless ones. After sacrificing half of their companions, they were lucky enough to escape and entered the Thorn Trail. They were then surrounded by dozens of Steelfang marauders, and in the end, only Hoof Imriel was left. The original captain and vice-captain were all killed on the way. Duque scratched his head and thought, is this the lucky E of the ancient walk-on? But this was war. Although high-end martial arts could be used as the deciding factor, most of the time, it still depended on the efforts of mortals to tilt the scales of victory in their favor. Duque felt a little sorry for the Drenii. After transmigrating for so long, Duque had seen many worlds. But now, Duque finally had a taste of what it felt like to continue to hold on to a world that was about to fall into the abyss of hell. He could not help but recall the rich elven forest. Even though it was once burned by the flames of war spread by the beast men, with the washing of time and the efforts of mortals, it was still able to recover. And not this land that was getting more barren by the day. Let's go. To Shotrath. Thomas said, but realized that Imriel did not move. It was obvious that this Drenii was acting out what it meant to be a rookie trembling. That was really trembling. The trembling was even more obvious on her tail. That was because every member of the Alliance team was riding on a large bug. These bugs looked very tame. But no matter how she looked at them, they were no different from the Steelfang marauders that almost took her life. Come on, it's okay. Thomas, who was riding on the bug, gently reached out his hand. Imriel looked left and right, and said weakly, Mr. Dooku, can I ride on the same mount as you? At this moment, Thomas's body suddenly stiffened, and the expression on his face froze. It was not hard to imagine that his single dog heart received 100,000 points of critical damage at this moment. The bystanders couldn't help but wonder if a gust of evil wind would blow in the next second and cause his entire body to be eroded and dissipate with the wind. Duque's face was full of embarrassment. In Karazhan, Jaina slammed the table and laughed. Duque. I didn't expect you to be able to provoke the little girl even though you're controlling an avatar. Wahahaha. Is this the legendary fatal invisible flirting? What else could Duke do when the other party had already said so? Mark, who was controlled by Duque, smiled and said, "It's my honor, madam. There's another advantage to sitting behind me. At least you don't have to be afraid of being pricked by the edges of the armor. If that was the case, then forget it. I've never ridden a mount before. Can I sit in the front? I'm afraid I'll fall off." Thomas received an additional 1 million points of critical damage to his soul. Sure. While riding on it, Imriel noticed a detail. She noticed that there was a line of words engraved on the hard shell of the worm's neck, Mount Akina. This is, Duque's face turned red, but he immediately put on a serious face. There's no time to explain. Get on. Oh, no, get on quickly. Oh, okay. The newbie was pure. She realized that she had been delayed here for too long. Now that her capital was under siege, and her people were constantly being sacrificed, she was still dawdling here. She even needed Mark, an ally, to remind her. She really shouldn't have done that. At that moment, Imriel couldn't help but respect Duque. With someone leading the way, the rest of the matter was much simpler. They still needed to pass through those few areas. Under Imriel's lead, the Alliance's advance party could avoid many places where monsters gathered. While looking for a place to insert the magic net signal booster, they pushed forward. The advance party spent 5 days and finally passed through the thorny rocky grounds, bypassing Turam, and arrived at the southwest of Shotrath City. Shotrath City was the capital of the Drenii people of Draenor. Another meaning of its name was where the holy light is. After Jaden deceived Nanzul and provoked the orcs to start a war against the Drenii, a fierce battle broke out here. Although the Drenii held fast to the capital, Shotrath City still fell. The entire city was reduced to ruins until Shotar came here. Originally, this place had already begun to be rebuilt. Although the progress was incomparably slow, it was indeed being rebuilt. Unexpectedly, after Illidan returned to the Outland, in order to make the entire Outland his strongest backing, he began to purge all those who opposed him. At that moment, the sound of war drums outside could be heard even a few kilometers away, reaching the center of Shotrath City. Unlike the tense atmosphere of the battle outside, the center of Shotrath City was quiet. Shotrath City had a strange structure. In the center, there was an incomparably huge hemispherical hall. The buildings of the Drenii all had a similar style. This hall was a bit like the Temple of Karabair, the Drenii's holy land. It was supported by huge gray-brown pillars. In between the gaps of the stone building, it was all dazzling purple and blue glass. The pointed leaf-shaped doors were stacked one after another. No matter when it looked like a beautiful work of art. In the center of the hall, there was a human figure made of countless golden leaf-like fragments floating in the air. That was the synonym for holy light, Naru. This kind of energy creature with a strong sense of self was the most resolute existence against the Burning Legion. In front of the surging energy of the Naru's seat, even the most bloodthirsty warrior would be at peace, and the most exhausted believer would be in awe. In front of the seat of Naru, anyone who glanced at it from afar would receive great comfort from the pillar of holy light. In front of the seat of Naru, Valen carefully recalled the clues he had recently sensed about the future, trying to discern the deep or shallow connections between them. Over the past few months, he had sensed more and more fragmented clues. The Drenii prophet crossed his legs under his body and put his hands on his old knees. When he meditated, the crystals seemed to respond to his power. It shone, pulsed, and danced around him in a chaotic but not orderly way. Countless illusions that could happen in the future were surging towards him. Once again, he sensed a variable full of hope coming from the east. At this moment, on the wide passage of Shotrath City, Garrison Officer Maralad was holding a huge crystal warhammer, fighting against those hateful beastmen. These guys looked no different from 20 years ago. He was very tired. Even if the holy light gave him endless courage, it still could not completely offset the exhaustion of his body. At this moment, his hooves slipped, causing him to fall to his knees. Seeing an incomparably filthy broken axe about to chop his neck, he could even feel the aura of death emanating from the poorly made axe blade with a few notches. Suddenly, the tribe blew the horn to retreat. What happened? Chapter 1391. The Drenii were at an absolute disadvantage. Although they had the support of the Holy Light and could theoretically heal their wounds endlessly, the Holy Light was not omnipotent. The blood lost in the wound could not flow back into the body, and the lost strength could only be recovered through rest. Unless there was a high concentration of Holy Light, there was no way to defend against knives, axes, and clubs. In the face of an enemy 10 times their size, the advantage of the Holy Light had been worn out. If it were not for the magic support of the astrologer, Shotrath City would have been breached long ago. It could be foreseen that if the situation did not improve, it would be a repeat of 25 years ago, and the Drenii would once again lose in a war of attrition. The orcs used blood and lives to wear down Shotrath City. However, the loud sound of war drums, the clanging of weapons, the moans of the dying struggling on the ground, and the angry roars, all the sounds were stopped by the sound of the retreat horn. What happened? Every warrior on the battlefield had a confused expression. Last time, the one who saved Shotrath City from destruction was the blood elf who had now become an astrologer. Who was it this time? No one. In the desolate sky, there was nothing. Ordinary birds and beasts had long been scared away by the loud noise. In the distance, the fell orcs, who had learned their lesson, had sent back and forth patrolling wolf riders. There were no reinforcements in sight. What drove Illidan's lackeys to give up the victory that was within their grasp? There was only one answer. It was a blue flag that had been raised beside the Drenii's Holy Light war flag in Shotrath City. None of the Drenii had seen this war flag. Legend had it that the flag of the alliance from another world, which had reached a preliminary alliance with the Drenii, was also blue. But that flag had a lion on it, and this one was a tornado. Could it be that this flag scared the enemy away? That was impossible, right? The Drenii garrison officers almost forgot to breathe, and looked at this scene with an expression that they had never seen before. Not to mention them, even the Drenii maiden Iril who had just raised the flag was so shocked that her jaw almost dropped. Her teeth were chattering. It actually scared off those ferocious orcs. Thomas, who was standing at the side, was also extremely shocked. Of course, he recognized this flag, or rather, he had grown up listening to the legend of this flag. This Storm Duke flag was the symbol of an era, a living legend. One flag to repel an army of 10,000. No one had expected that the miracle that had happened in Kuel Salas's Silvermoon City, which had been sung about by countless bards in the taverns, would repeat itself. Duque was already a demigod. Of course, he wouldn't bother to boast about himself. Even if he did not do so, Thomas and the other spectators would naturally tell Imriel about the legend of the flag. In an instant, the little girl had turned into a fangirl. Even her gaze towards the Storm War flag had become filled with some kind of fanaticism. It wasn't her fault. In recent decades, the Drenii had been bullied by the orcs. As outsiders of Draenor, how could the orcs give them face? Long before the orcs, under the instigation of Zul, started a full-scale war against the Drenii, both sides already had a feud. All kinds of border conflicts and mutual harm had long been the foreshadowing of this great war. It was just that at that time, the orcs lived a scattered lifestyle with clans as units. The Drenii also tried their best to suppress themselves under Valen's persuasion. But so what? The orcs took pride in killing the Drenii. The brave Drenii, their fathers and brothers had their heads chopped off and made into specimens, which were hung on the war flags of various clans. Their wives and daughters were used as food to feed the bloodthirsty war wolves. And all of this came to an end with the unparalleled war that lasted for several years, as well as the fall of Shotrath City. Battle after battle, defeat after defeat. Defeat after defeat. This was the portrayal of the Drenii. Today, the evil orcs came again. With hope for the light, the Drenii once again tried to defend their holy city, but no one had really imagined the taste of success. They relied purely on courage to support themselves. That kind of desperate struggle, and the feat of easily scaring away the orcs, formed a stark contrast. The Drenii maiden, Iril, had a strange emotion in her heart that she could not understand. She suddenly became extremely eager to see the owner of this flag. At this moment, in Karazhan, Aurelia, who happened to be strolling by Duque's place, saw this scene. Yo! Not bad. I didn't think that this big flag of Duke Marcus could be used to swindle people in the Outland. The eldest sister of the Windrunner family teased Duque. Duque laughed. If it was all those brainless fell orcs, there really wouldn't be any way. Just nice, the one leading the army is Kilrog Deadeye. If it was another orc leader who was not clear-headed, he would most likely only be frightened for a moment, and would never give the order to retreat. Kilrog was different. He had inherited the memories of his previous life, and also the fear of being an orc. That was from the beginning of the second battle at the Dark Portal. No matter how he struggled, he could not succeed. No matter how he tried to change himself, he was still tortured by Duque. He could not take down the Iron Furnace Fort, and was brutally abused in the final battle. Then, he turned around and followed the new boss, Zul, and was abused again. He even died next to the Dark Portal. More importantly, Kilrog was one of the rare beast men who possessed Esper abilities. His single red eye had the ability to see the future to a certain extent, even though it could only see small fragments of the future. But all along, he had relied on this ability to consolidate his power and kill in all directions. This time, without exception, he looked at the flag with his one eye, which was usually blind. As expected. He clearly felt a trace of Duque's divine power. Almost at the moment he looked over, Kilrog saw an illusory projection of Duque that was even larger than Shotrath City. In Duque's deep black eyes, there seemed to be a dazzling seven-colored flame burning in the depths of his eyes. Duque opened his mouth slightly, and the next moment, the voice of the soul that came out seemed to shake the entire Draenor world. Sargera's soul trembles under my feet. Archimonde's soul was nailed to death by me on Mount Hyjal. Kilrog, who do you think you are? I'll only say this once, scram. The buzzing in the soul world triggered countless strange and blurry scenes of light. Kilrog saw at this moment that Medivh, who was possessed by Sargeras, died tragically under Duque's sword. He saw the insufferably arrogant Archimonde being blown to death on Mount Hyjal, and even his bones were still hanging on a withered tree. He saw the huge and boundless distorted void fortress being wantonly blown into pieces. It turned out that the new master that he thought was invincible actually had such a weak side. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.